Okay, now is it working? So, okay, hello, welcome. Today we are going to take up the PT 365 document covering international relations. So things should be clearer what exactly is required to be done in this examination, because without that what happens is most of you have the common problem कि इतना याद कैसे करें. UPSC is never saying कि इतना याद करो, पहले तो ये याद रख लो. UPSC questions are about patterns. So have you been able to see some patterns through the question and the syllabus? क्योंकि syllabus और question paper इसको बहुत ही कम वैल्यू देते हैं लोग, जबकि यूपीएससी क्या चाहता है ये केवल इन्हीं दो चीजों से पता चल सकता है और कोई ज्ञान नहीं है इसका. राइट, सो देयर बाय PT 365 लाइक डॉक्यूमेंट इज नथिंग बट अ स्पेशल मॉड्यूल ऑफ करंट अफेयर्स covering a particular cycle. For example, this document which we are going to take up today covers from April 2022 till December 2022, and the process is after that there would be an updation of the document beyond December 2022. So then it's coverage of the cycle. It means if you have been reading newspaper, if you have been reading monthly current affairs magazine, you are aware of the information. And remember, in UPSC examination, repetition has a lot of value. So जब आपके पास सवाल आता है कि चीजें याद कैसे रहेंगी, स्टैंड अलोन बिना कॉन्टेक्स्ट के चीजें याद नहीं रहती. वंस यू हैव द पर्पस कि किस लिए इस चीज को पढ़ रहे हो, चीजें रिपीटिशन से रिटेन होती हैं. राइट, दिस इज द सिंपलेस्ट थिंग दैट यू कैन डू, रादर देन थिंकिंग कि यूपीएससी सोच रहा है कि आप जितना पढ़ो उतना ही आपको याद हो जाए. यूपीएससी इज नॉट रीजनेबली एक्सपेक्टिंग दिस. सो लेट्स फर्स्ट become familiar with the document which we would be covering. All right, the document which we would be covering is accessible to all of you as of now. सबके पास है? Okay. So you look at the document and it's 96 pages in length, but the actual number of coverable pages are 70. Right? तो पहले तो आप यही गिनते हैं कि इतना पढ़ना है क्या, इतना नहीं पढ़ना है. Actual number of coverable pages are 70. Then if you have applied yourself to the document, you know where the difficulties were, because the document in many senses is self-explanatory. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है जो मैं समझाऊं यहां पे, अनलेस आपको लगे कि आपके पास कोई क्वेश्चन है. ठीक है, तो दूसरा तरीका ये है कि वी फर्स्ट हैव अ सेंस ऑफ व्हाट काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस यूपीएससी आस्क्स, देन वी हैव अ कैटेगरी ऑफ areas of question, meaning what kind of information is UPSC putting up in the question. 2 is type of question. Type of question का क्या मतलब हुआ? Either there are straight options based question, जहां 4 ऑप्शन है, आपको एक्सरसाइज करना है वो 4 ऑप्शन, or second is statement based question where information is put in front of you in statements and you have to basically judge whether the statements are correct or not correct. All right, and third kind of options can be pairs. All right, there also UPSC is saying just consider which of the pairs are matched correctly or incorrectly. So it is also about understanding the exam. Content और knowledge के बारे में केवल नहीं है, कोई भी एग्जाम केवल content और knowledge के बारे में नहीं होता. Unless you understand what the exam process is, you would always have this problem कि इतना याद कर लें, क्योंकि आज तक सारे एग्जाम इसी बेसिस पे दिए हैं. So UPSC का एग्जाम जो इतना वाइड है, does not expect you to remember everything, but it expects you to be educated, regular, dedicated, and thereby find your own solutions. So हम इस डॉक्यूमेंट को कवर करेंगे, जहां जरूरत पड़ेगी पेज बाय पेज, जहां जरूरत पड़ेगी ब्रीफ समरी. बट बिफोर दैट व्हाट आई विल डू इज टुडे आई विल स्पेंड टाइम इन गोइंग विथ यू थ्रू द यूपीएससी क्वेश्चंस, प्रिलिमिनरी एग्जामिनेशन क्वेश्चन. ऑलराइट, सो दैट इज द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट वी विल डू, सो दैट rest reading the document becomes easier for you as well. So if you look at UPSC questions syllabus wise, preliminary examination is not where it is very clearly defined that international relations related questions would be asked. In the preliminary examination, the syllabus simply says in one of the points, current events of national and international importance or significance. तो एक तो इससे आइडिया लगता है कि करंट अफेयर से ड्राइव होगा क्वेश्चन, इट वुड बी इंस्पायर्ड बाय करंट अफेयर्स. ऑलराइट, बट देयर इज नो करंट अफेयर्स विच डज नॉट हैव बेसिक्स और फंडामेंटल्स. करंट अफेयर्स अपने आप में कोई चीज नहीं होती है. देयर इज अ सर्टेन ऑब्सेशन विच हैज डेवलप्ड विद करंट अफेयर्स. राइट, सो करंट अफेयर्स इंस्पायर्स क्वेश्चन, यूपीएससी में गो टुवर्ड समथिंग फंडामेंटल. ऑलराइट, This is something that we derive from looking at years of question papers. So that's why going towards the preliminary examination, one thing that you should do is try to solve at least 20 years of previous years questions of the UPSC. Static part अपने आप cover हो जाता है इस method से, क्योंकि static part में बहुत ज़्यादा बचता नहीं है. कुछ question UPSC repeat भी करता है over the years. You get the knowledge of that. But more importantly, you get the knowledge of kind of options UPSC sets, kind of language that UPSC questions have. Because no test series can match the language and the structure of the questions that UPSC sets. Why? Because UPSC के पास जितनी power है किसी के पास नहीं है. Right? So that's why that should be your starting point. Second is, once you are reading something, you already have an idea कि किस तरह के question आते हैं. So your reading is anchored in that context. All right? So the question is, जो हम तैयारी करते हैं तो हम क्वेश्चन पूछते हैं अपने आप से, इतना पढ़ना पड़ेगा या इतना याद करना पड़ेगा. दैट्स अ रॉन्ग क्वेश्चन. ऑल राइट. दूसरा एक जो सवाल आता है फोमो, फियर ऑफ मिसिंग आउट. ऑल राइट, जो बहुत ज्यादा है सब में, बिकॉज ऑफ, आई वुड से बिकॉज ऑफ प्रोलिफरेशन ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन ऑन सोशल मीडिया. राइट. सो द राइट क्वेश्चन इज नॉट व्हाट इफ, अगर ऐसा हो गया तो. राइट. यू डोंट प्रिपेयर, फॉर एग्जाम्पल क्रिकेट में हम कहते हैं यू डोंट सेट फील्ड फॉर बैड बॉल्स. ऑल राइट. तो आप जो कर सकते हैं वो आप कीजिए. सो देयर बाय द क्वेश्चन दैट यू शुड बी आस्किंग इज वेयर वुड आई यूज दिस इंफॉर्मेशन. ऑल राइट. जब भी अखबार पढ़ रहे हो, कुछ भी पढ़ रहे हो, क्वेश्चन होना चाहिए वेयर वुड आई यूज दिस इंफॉर्मेशन. पेपर 1, पेपर 2, पेपर 3, पेपर 4, ऐसे कहां पे. सो देन योर प्रिपरेशन बिकम्स एंजॉयबल. ऑल राइट. चलिए, तो हम क्वेश्चन पेपर जब देखते हैं तो हमको एक आइडिया लगता है कि ए यूपीएससी सिलेबस इज नॉट a watertight compartment. Each of the topics flow into each other. There is some connection. So there is world geography, there is world history also as part of the syllabus of preliminary examination. So we understand that current inspires the question, but UPSC tries to ask fundamentals. 1, 2, UPSC asks awareness-based questions, not expertise-based questions. UPSC does not ask unnecessarily complicated questions or generally trivial questions. किस डेट को क्या हुआ था. All right. So generally this is something that you will start deriving from the question paper, right? कि ऐसा है, and this gives you confidence. No matter what anyone says, UPSC पेपर जब आएगा तो वो आसान होगा, ऐसा मान के चलना चाहिए. बिकॉज टेस्ट सीरीज के पेपर मुश्किल होते हैं, यूपीएससी का पेपर आसान होता है. राइट. अब हम देखते हैं कि किस तरह के क्वेश्चन आते हैं जब इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस के सब्जेक्ट मैटर से. सो इट इंस्पायर्स क्वेश्चंस रिलेटेड टू लोकेशन. ऑल राइट. लोकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. Why would UPSC ask any location as part of the question paper? Because that location was in news. Because if somebody is reading the newspaper, they may have come across the news. And what kind of questions does UPSC ask when it asks location-based question? Is it asking you to be a topographer or a cartographer? Right? No, it is asking awareness-based question. For example, last year, if you remember, UPSC asked a question about countries sharing borders with Afghanistan. ठीक है? तो अगर एक्सेप्शंस को देख के तैयारी करोगे तो मुश्किल लगेगा, पर जनरल पैटर्न को देखोगे तो यू अंडरस्टैंड एवरी एग्जामिनेशन हैज सर्टेन कैटेगरीज ऑफ क्वेश्चंस. इजी क्वेश्चंस, मीडियम क्वेश्चन. द लार्जर मिक्स इज इजी टू मीडियम क्वेश्चंस. ऑल राइट. एंड देन देयर आर डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चंस. तो आप हमेशा डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चंस की तैयारी करते रहे तो आपसे इजी और मीडियम कैटेगरी के क्वेश्चन जो सॉल्वेबल थे वो छूट जाते हैं. ऑल राइट. और आप कठिन क्वेश्चन में ज्यादा दिमाग लगाते हैं, ज्यादा टाइम लगाते हैं, एग्जाम में भी ज्यादा टाइम लगाते हैं, जबकि वो क्वेश्चन, कुछ क्वेश्चन तो छोड़ने के लिए होते हैं. राइट. दैट यू डोंट नो अबाउट इट, सो डोंट वेंचर इनटू इट. इसके अलावा हम देखते हैं कि लोकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन के अलावा रिलेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन, समटाइम्स अ कंट्री स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चन कम्स इन. लास्ट ईयर वियतनाम. ऑल राइट. वियतनाम. जनरल स्टेटमेंट्स अबाउट वियतनाम, फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. Why did that question come? If you look at last year's PT 6065, Vietnam is covered in that document. Right? And my suggestion was, please read it. There is nothing complicated here. With Vietnam, India has significant relations. With Vietnam, last year there may have been certain visits. But it is not about the relation per se that UPSC asked. UPSC asked you, what do you know about Vietnam? All right? And what do you know about Vietnam is covered through any newspaper that you are reading. In that particular year must have covered the visits from Vietnam or to Vietnam in that particular year. So relation-based questions. All right? And then organization-based questions, fairly common. What kind of questions? Questions, for example, who publishes such as such report? All right? Or United Nations or some of its bodies, right? Questions related to that, right? Or BIMSTEC, or Mekong Ganga, or ASEAN, Questions like that. And again, what kind of questions? Either fundamental, and that fundamental I show you has been covered in the newspaper. Simple newspaper reading does it, right? Or it asks awareness based question. Are you aware? All right. UPSC is simply saying that are you aware? That is what they are testing. Current events of national and international significance, and then you have certain agreement based questions. All right. Certain common agreements, primarily in the area of environment, or in the area of social development, SDG related, all right, or gender related. These kinds of agreement based questions generally are, or agricultural related. These kinds of questions UPSC asks. And all of these questions mostly are rooted in the current events. जो साल हुआ उसके context में इसकी चर्चा हुई होगी, that's why you should know about it. So if you simply read the text only, और हर दिन अखबार से ये सवाल पूछोगे कि ये कहाँ होने वाला है, तो वो एक दिन में नहीं होता. So that is a cumulative process. That's why ultimately you have a document like PT 365. But ultimately all of those 365 days involved one single day. Every day newspaper came, every day something in current affairs was covered. So either you do this long way or you do this short way. ये आपके ऊपर है. ठीक है? So now let's look at certain questions. All right? Let's look at certain questions. So if we look at the question, let's start with 2014. All right, I'll do some of your job. This is a question asked in 2014 about BRICS. What is BRICS? What kind of question is this? What area of question is this? Organization related question. What is it that this question is asking? Is it asking you to be an expert of BRICS? What kind of negotiations are taking place? What kind of working groups are there? No, it is asking an awareness-based question, purely current affairs question. 2014 BRICS summit, which is the highest level of meeting of any international organization, took place at Fort Aleza in Brazil. That is the first summit in which the newly elected Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, participated. Every summit issues a document which is always associated with the name of the city. All right, Fort Aleza Declaration. Right. So BRICS, the basics of BRICS is very simple. 2006. BRICS starts as an interaction between Brazil, Russia, India, China. Why? Because Goldman Sachs in its report had used the term emerging economies, and it had identified these as the emerging economies. So now apart from developed economies, developing economies, you have another term, emerging economies, right? Economies who have the features of both developed economies and developing economies. But certainly in the future they are going to be important. So that was the context of discussions. This discussion led to the summit 2009, the first summit of BRICS takes place in Yekaterinburg, Russia. Russia 2009, first summit, meaning now the meeting is taking place at the highest level. And since then summits have been taking place. 2010 it was decided that South Africa be included in this group, and in 2011 summit South Africa participated, so that became BRICS. All right. 2014 Fort Aleza Declaration is important because now BRICS has completed a decade and now its membership is more comprehensive. So then now the BRICS from a dialogue mechanism simply starts moving towards institutionalization, creating institutions. Fort Aleza Declaration is important because one of the commitments in this declaration was formation of a bank called the NDB, New Development Bank, right? That is where the NDB was mentioned. So current affairs of that particular year. What is the question that UPSC asked? It's a statement based question. Two statements of information are given and you have to judge which of them are correct. The first summit of BRICS was held in Rio de Janeiro in 2009. I already told you, no, Yekaterinburg, right? So now you see the information. You don't exactly need to remember complete information. All right, you remember the place or the year. Generally UPSC will give you an opportunity to identify the option correctly, and these are very easy options. South Africa was the last to join the BRICS grouping, right? Again, once you know the information, it's simply an awareness based question and it is a purely current affairs based question, right? 2014. Moving forward, 2015, which of the following organization brings out the publication known as World Economic Outlook? You should know about it. अगर आपने बेकार की इंफॉर्मेशन के पीछे समय नहीं बिताया है, अगर ये नहीं सोचा कि सब याद करना है, तो आपको ये इंफॉर्मेशन लगातार मिलेगी. These are some of the periodic reports of the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank. बहुत सारी रिपोर्ट्स हैं इनकी, बहुत सारे ब्लॉग्स आते हैं, बहुत सारे एरिया में रिपोर्ट्स हैं, पर जो पीरियोडिक पब्लिकेशन है उनका, मतलब रेगुलरली जो आता है, वो ये 2-3 पब्लिकेशन ही है, राइट? सो कैन यू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन? चलिए अगला ऐसा ही एक क्वेश्चन, which one of the following issues the global economic prospects report periodically? Again, it's a periodic report. Generally these kinds of reports are issued twice or thrice in a year. Generally these kinds of reports you will find in the months of September and October, discussed prominently. All right, कोई भी अखबार पढ़ रहे होगे, अगर इस बारे में छपा है तो बेसिक भी वो अखबार बता देता है. Right, move forward. So these are the publications. ये 5 इंफॉर्मेशन हो गई. अब आपके पास ये तय हो गया कि ये इंफॉर्मेशन तो याद कर सकते हैं. And this comes through repetition, something which is coming again and again and again and again in the news. अब वो तो reasonably UPSC can expect that you should remember it. All right, if you have the right focus, because one part of the examination would always be to find out redundancies, right, to reduce the amount that you have to cover, right. So World Bank publishes World Development Report, Global Economic Prospects, Doing Business Report, Ease of Doing Business Report. That is, the IMF publishes World Economic Outlook, Global Financial Stability Report. Okay? So this information is not going to change only because it is current affairs. Why? Because these reports are issued every year. So that's why naturally it would be covered in the current affairs, or it would be mentioned in the current affairs. It need not be covered in a special document. All right, because it is not purely current affairs. All right, it's just part of annual cycle of something which has been happening for years, right? So that's how you start realizing what current affairs actually means. Moving forward, let's look at this question. A lot of people are very interested in WTO. It is very complicated to understand WTO. Understanding WTO or mastering WTO is very complicated task. But every time students in the class are trying to do that, and they have some questions क्योंकि उन्होंने कोई वीडियो देख लिया है ना? So उनको पता नहीं है कि ये debates बहुत पुरानी हो गई हैं. So but look at the question that UPSC asked. It's a purely awareness based question. क्या आपने सुना है? The terms agreement on agriculture, agreement on application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, peace clause appear in the news frequently in the context of affairs of World Trade Organization. Organization based question and awareness based question. India has been using the peace clause in the matter of agriculture, specifically paddy production and procurement. It declares कि हमारे पास इतना है, peace clause का इस्तेमाल किया. Peace clause का मतलब है कि कोई भी जो खर्चा है एग्रीकल्चर से रिलेटेड, अगर वो डी मिनिमस के ऊपर जाता है तो उसको डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशन में नहीं ले जाएंगे. यू विल नॉट कॉल इन फॉर डिस्प्यूट टिल वी फाइंड अ परमानेंट सॉल्यूशन. तो ये यहां तक WTO का प्रोसेस हो चुका है. उस साल में कुछ हो रहा होगा, 2015 में क्या हो रहा होगा? नैरोबी बाली पैकेजेस. ऑल राइट, नैरोबी बाली पैकेजेस, अंडरस्टैंडिंग एग्रीमेंट ऑन एग्रीकल्चर, इट्स इंप्लीमेंटेशन इज डिफिकल्ट, बिकॉज आपको ये समझना चाहिए कि ऐसा नहीं होता कि कोई एग्रीमेंट है तो उसके अंदर केवल बाइंडिंग चीजें ही होंगी. देयर आर लॉट ऑफ फ्लेक्सिबिलिटीज, राइट. जैसे WTO के केस में हम कहते हैं स्पेशल एंड डिफरेंशियल ट्रीटमेंट. ऑल राइट, so basically fundamental understanding हो सकती है WTO की if you simply focus on what are the principles of WTO, right, what are the major agreements of WTO, what is the structure of WTO. वो भी आप पढ़ के जाओ तो भी UPSC क्या क्वेश्चन पूछता है, क्या सुना है आपने इनके बारे में. All right, awareness based question. So that's why I'm saying UPSC does not ask unnecessarily complicated questions, and that is the evidence that I'm trying to give you. There is another method also कि मैं मुश्किल सवाल से शुरू करता और कहता है कि देखो UPSC ये पूछा, UPSC में ये होता है, but that is not the correct way of doing it. So let's move forward and look at this question. Again, it is from NPT. NPT is always in news because it came into force in 1970 as a treaty, and in 1995 it was in a sense extended indefinitely, meaning it does not have an expiry date, and it's open to signature to certain countries who have not signed it. India has not signed NPT. So first basis of asking this question is NPT being fundamentally significant. Second, it being in news in the context of India because India is a prominent non-signatory of the NPT. So basics क्या है इसके? NPT aims at strengthening what we call the attempts preventing global proliferation. Proliferation of what? Proliferation or spread of weapons of a particular category, that is nuclear weapons. So in that sense, it also aims at promoting disarmament. What is disarmament? Disarmament is the elimination, complete elimination of weapons of any category. The step prior to disarmament is arms reduction, all right, or arms control. So it also may be seen as an arms control treaty, right? So non-proliferation, disarmament, arms control. But it is also dealing with a technology, piece of technology which is dual use technology. On the one hand, the nuclear technology is responsible for destruction in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear weapons, but nuclear technology has other far-reaching applications in particle or nuclear physics, or in radiation therapies, right, the medical usage, or in energy production. So NPT is also about creating mechanisms so that scientific use of nuclear technology is promoted. Cooperation in scientific and peaceful, more importantly, use of nuclear technology is promoted. That is called the civilian use of nuclear technology. That's why you will see key agreements between countries are on civil nuclear aspects. All right, they are never on nuclear weapons. AUKUS के साथ प्रॉब्लम ये है कि न्यूक्लियर प्रोपल्शन टेक्नोलॉजी इन्वॉल्व होगी ऑस्ट्रेलिया के नए सबमरीन्स बनाने में. अब ये मिलिट्री यूज है या नॉन मिलिट्री यूज है? क्या आप मिलिट्री व्हीकल के प्रोपल्शन टेक्नोलॉजी को अलग करते हैं उसके वेपन सिस्टम से? तो ये कटिंग एज डिबेट है, इसका फैसला आगे जाके होगा, और that's where NPT would be important. But we understand that when NPT came into picture, it had three goals, three pillars. One is non-proliferation, second is disarmament, third is promoting peaceful cooperation in peaceful use of nuclear technology. All right, these are the three pillars. Now, the way NPT is structured, it identifies countries in two categories. One is nuclear weapon states. So there are only 5 recognized nuclear weapon states according to NPT, and these are also the P5, permanent 5 members of the Security Council. Why? Because the cutoff date in NPT is 1967. All right. So that is one category. Now the other states, no matter who you are, you would always be a non-nuclear weapon states, right? So only 5 states are there who are nuclear weapon states. So whenever a number category is less than 10, it is reasonably expected that you would be able to remember it. Second thing, NPT is such an issue which would be in news every year. So it is reasonably expected that if you are regular, if you are serious, if you are sincere, you will know about it. And remember, that's why preliminary examination is a more of, not a selection examination, but a elimination examination. Right? And who is the UPSC eliminating in the first go? Those who generally would be called non-serious candidates. And if there is no value involved here, non-serious can be maybe in that particular year you had some problems, you did not prepare well. All right? Or somehow you did not have the aptitude in that particular year for the examination. जो भी हुआ, time manage नहीं हुआ, जो भी हुआ. So सबसे पहले तो उनको eliminate करना है. That's basically what UPSC would be doing. क्योंकि उसको अपना मेंस का टास्क आसान करना है. राइट मेंस में भी सबकी कॉपी नहीं चेक करनी है, उनकी कॉपी चेक करनी है जिनमें कुछ बेसिक एबिलिटीज हो. तो जब तक आपके अंदर वो बेसिक एबिलिटीज नहीं होंगी, यू विल ऑलवेज हैव अ फाइट विद द प्रिलिमिनरी स्टेज. और अगर सारी एबिलिटीज डेवलप भी कर लो तो देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड लक, चांस, सेरेंडिपिटी. ऑलराइट, सो ओनली एड्रेस थिंग्स विच यू कैन एड्रेस, यू कैन नॉट एड्रेस लक, चांस, सेरेंडिपिटी. तो इसलिए उसको तो किनारे रख दो, सबके लिए बराबर है वो. राइट, पर ये तो आप कर सकते हैं खुद से क्वेश्चन पेपर देखना, क्वेश्चंस को समझना, उनके स्ट्रक्चर को समझना. तो इस क्वेश्चन का आंसर तो बड़ा आसान सा है. विच अमंग द अबव आर न्यूक्लियर वेपन स्टेट्स recognized by the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, commonly known as the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. तो इसमें Israel, Pakistan, India, we know are the non-signatories of NPT, prominent non-signatories of NPT, right? North Korea signed the NPT, came out of the NPT, all right? And South Sudan is a new country which is still to sign the NPT, all right? So there are only few states who are non-signatories of NPT, and there are only few states which are recognized as nuclear powers within NPT. तो अब बताओ, अगर NPT के signatories are nearly 190, do you need to know about all the 190 countries? So that is something that you start realizing once you are preparing in the right direction, that these preliminary questions are of no value, कि मैं इतना याद कैसे करूँगा, because this is not the right question. This is not even a question that UPSC is concerned with. आप नहीं याद कर पाएंगे, आपकी प्रॉब्लम है. पहले तो आप यही नहीं समझ पाए कि यूपीएससी ये नहीं कह रहा है कि याद करना है. यूपीएससी ये कह रहा है कि समझना है, पहले पेशेंस के साथ अवेयरनेस क्रिएट करनी है, एंड देन अप्लाई करके यू अप्लाई योरसेल्फ, एंड देन यू रियलाइज कि वेयर थिंग्स आर गोइंग रॉन्ग, एंड देन यू कम बैक टू द ड्राइंग बोर्ड, अगेन रीड, अगेन अप्लाई, और इसको दोहराते रहो इस प्रोसेस को. राइट, बट यू आर लुकिंग फॉर सम स्पेशल फॉर्मूला, तो आप डिसअपॉइंट होंगे. ये क्वेश्चन 2015 इज द ईयर ऑफ एनपीटी रिव्यू. एनपीटी रिव्यू कॉन्फ्रेंसेस आर सपोज टू टेक एवरी 5 years, टेक प्लेस एवरी 5 years. ठीक है, तो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी किसी न किसी न्यूज़पेपर ने इसको कवर किया होगा. सो दैट्स अनदर एविडेंस व्हाई करंट अफेयर्स is associated with at least questions in the preliminary examination. At what level? 2015, another question. This is another question that you, if you have paid attention to the question paper, you will find a similar question in 2022 also. Similar question. तो मैं जब भी पढ़ाता हूँ मैं हमेशा एक सलाह देता हूँ, one stage is when you answer questions. कोई और question आपको देता है, आप answer करते हैं. Second stage is when you start making your own questions. All right, for preparation. क्योंकि हमेशा तो आप क्लास में होगे नहीं, तो योर सेल्फ एफर्ट इज यू मेक योर ओन क्वेश्चंस. हाउ डू यू मेक योर ओन क्वेश्चन? द स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट इज लुकिंग एट यूपीएससी क्वेश्चंस. जस्ट कीप द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द क्वेश्चन एंड रिप्लेस द टर्म्स एंड इट बिकम्स योर क्वेश्चन, मेंस में भी और प्रिलिमिनरी एग्जामिनेशन में भी. राइट, इफ यू आर डूइंग दैट काइंड ऑफ प्रिपरेशन यू विल नॉट कंप्लेन. राइट, इंडिया इज अ मेंबर ऑफ विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग? एशिया पैसिफिक इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन, एसोसिएशन ऑफ साउथ ईस्ट एशियन नेशंस, ईस्ट एशिया समिट. सेलेक्ट कोड गिवन बिलो. क्या आंसर है भाई इसका? 3 only. Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, you know India is not a member. It has 21 members. China, Russia, Australia, right, some of the Southeast Asian countries, Papua New Guinea, these are some of the prominent members. But what is the lesser information? Rather than remembering who are the members, it is easier to remember who is not a member, and India is not a member, so all the more easier to focus on that information. All right, its headquarters is in Singapore, and it aims at creating economic cooperation among the member countries, who are primarily Pacific littoral countries of Asia and North America and South America. All right, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, it's a regional organization comprising of 10 countries of Southeast Asia. India is not part of it. Right, East Asia Summit, it is what we call ASEAN centered or ASEAN led frameworks or institutions. It's a strategic dialogue in the region. 10+8 is the format, 10 countries of ASEAN, 8 of their important dialogue partners. Right, India participates in East Asia Summit. It started in 2005. So सब कुछ पता होने के बाद भी यूपीएससी यही पूछ रहा है आपको कि भैया इंडिया किसका मेंबर है, इंडिया किसका मेंबर नहीं है. So that also starts giving you a hint कि when you are reading what you should be focusing on. All right? क्योंकि तैयारी लिमिटेड चीज़ों ही कर सकते हो. अब हर सवाल का जवाब तो दे भी नहीं पाओगे क्योंकि कट ऑफ तो होता नहीं है ना 200% या 100%. कट ऑफ कितना होता है? अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 50%. तो इसका मतलब क्या है? दैट you need to understand that at no stage of the examination you are forced to answer a question whose answer you don't know or are not able to derive. ठीक है, मेंस में भी नहीं. अगर कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं आता उसका जबरदस्ती आंसर लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. राइट, जनरली करेक्ट आंसर, बट डोंट राइट अ रॉन्ग आंसर. सो सिमिलरली यूपीएससी इज सेइंग दैट डोंट वरी, यू कैन फाइंड आउट द करेक्ट नंबर ऑफ क्वेश्चंस टू बी सॉल्व्ड टू गेट सेलेक्टेड, बट ओनली व्हेन यू हैव पेशेंस. होता क्या है, सभी रेस में मुझे पहले अटेम्प्ट में ही क्लियर करना है, मुझे आज ही क्लियर करना है. आप भूल जाते हैं यूपीएससी को जल्दी नहीं है. यूपीएससी इज नॉट गोइंग टू रिड्यूस इट्स 1 year साइकिल फॉर यू. ऑल राइट, वो समय चल रहा है. यूनिवर्स इज इनडिफरेंट टू योर वॉट एवर पेन्स एंड एगोनीज यू मे हैव. तो इसी को यूपीएससी के प्रोसेस में भी लगाओ. रादर देन कंप्लेनिंग, बिकम सॉल्यूशन ओरिएंटेड. ऑल राइट, प्रॉब्लम सबको पता है, सॉल्यूशन क्या है, और आपको सॉल्यूशन आपके इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे केवल आप दे सकते हैं. जनरल गाइडलाइंस कैन बी प्रोवाइडेड इन programs like classroom. Right, चलो आगे चलते हैं. 2016. Now this may seem to be a very complicated question, but it is not a complicated question. It is again an awareness based question. FOA के बारे में ज्यादातर पढ़ते नहीं हैं आप, या बहुत ज्यादा बात नहीं होती है. चाइना पाकिस्तान के एक्सपर्ट तो आप सभी हैं, है ना. वहां पे भी फंडामेंटल इंफॉर्मेशन सबकी गलत होगी, लगभग सबकी गलत होगी. क्यों? क्योंकि आईआर को पढ़ने का तरीका हो गया है. एक बात एक स्टूडेंट ने ऑब्जर्व की, जो मैं एग्री करता हूं, कि अखबार आधा होता है पॉलिटिक्स, आधा नहीं 25% होता है पॉलिटिक्स, 50% होता है आईआर. ऑल राइट, और जो बचा हुआ होता है वो इकोनॉमिक्स. पर क्या यूपीएससी, अगर ऐसा हो तो यूपीएससी को 5000 सवाल पूछने पड़ेंगे टोटल एग्जाम में, और उसमें फिर हो सकता है आईआर का बहुत ज्यादा सवाल आ जाए. पर आईआर के बहुत ज्यादा सवाल आते नहीं. कितने सवाल आते हैं? इन बेस्ट ईयर्स डायरेक्टली इनडायरेक्टली 6 to 7 क्वेश्चंस और 8 क्वेश्चंस. right? And since I teach the subject, I can also say that I can very clearly show you 10-12 questions also. पर बात वो नहीं है, बात ये है कि ये छोटा पोर्शन है एग्जाम का, right? So again you calculate return on investment always because you have to manage a lot of things. पढ़ो इसको, अगर अखबार पढ़ रहे थे तो इसका आंसर आपके पास होता. FAO meaning Food and Agricultural Organization accords the status of globally important agricultural heritage system to traditional agricultural systems. What is the overall goal of this initiative? Now if you see, the options are commonsensical, right? Once you have read some document, you would identify what the correct option is and you would be able to eliminate what the wrong option is. To provide modern technology training in modern farming methods and financial support to local communities of identified GIHS so as to greatly enhance their agricultural productivity. ये option मैं इसलिए reject करता हूँ कि इसमें modern शब्द बहुत है. All right? When you identify something as a heritage, the idea is you preserve it as it is, right? You don't modernize it. So it's a commonsensical option, right? नाम क्या है? Globally important agricultural heritage system. Common sense काम करता है यहाँ पे after you have done enough of preparation. Second, to identify and safeguard eco-friendly traditional farm practices and their associated landscapes, agricultural biodiversity and knowledge systems of the local communities, to provide geographical indication status to all the varieties of agricultural produce in such identified areas. ठीक है, तो ये ऑप्शन जो है सेकंड वाला बिल्कुल रीजनेबल सही लग रहा है. ऑलराइट, और बहुत बार जहां पे भी ऑल दी वेराइटीज ऑफ एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोड्यूस एक्सेट्रा ये यूज होना शुरू हो जाता है तो हमारे पास एक हिंट होता है कि मे बी ये सही नहीं होगा. ऑलराइट, तो ऐसे कॉमन सेंस से इसका आंसर कर सकते हैं. दूसरा तरीका था, बहुत लंबा क्वेश्चन है, हो सकता है मुझे इसका आंसर नहीं आता, मैंने नहीं पढ़ा, इसको छोड़ के आगे बढ़ते हैं. बहुत सिंपल सा तरीका है, जरूरी नहीं है कि आप इसको सही ही कर दें. ठीक है, लास्ट में आए, जब सारे क्वेश्चन कर चुके हो लास्ट में एक बार और दिमाग लगाएं. तो कॉमन सेंस लगाने का टाइम होता है टुवर्ड्स द एंड, है ना, टुवर्ड्स द एंड. वंस यू हैव अप्लाइड योरसेल्फ थ्रू एलिमिनेशन, थ्रू लॉजिक, थ्रू डायरेक्ट नॉलेज, लास्ट में कुछ क्वेश्चन बचते हैं जिनको आपको कंसिडर करना है. वहां आप कॉमन सेंस के बेसिस पे गेस कर सकते हैं, है ना. तो गेस इन्फॉर्म्ड हो सकता है, कॉमन सेंसिकल हो सकता है. अब बहुत ज़्यादा कैलकुलेट करके गेस नहीं लगता. आप जब बहुत ज़्यादा सोचने लगे तो वो गेस नहीं रह जाता है, राइट. बट इफ यू आर रीडिंग द न्यूज़पेपर, यू सी व्हाई दिस वाज इन न्यूज़. 2016 it came under the Food and Agricultural Organization. All right. It initially, when it started, it was funded by Global Environment Facility around the period of 2003 to 2005. We have many deliberations about financing. Climate change को देख रहे हो तो अभी जो डील हुई है ये समझ लो उसकी बातचीत की शुरुआत उसने पहले हो गई थी. क्लाइमेट चेंज है तो इसका मतलब है कि दो तरह के व्यूज हैं, डेवलप डेवलपिंग. एग्रीकल्चर है, दो तरह के व्यूज हैं, डेवलप डेवलपिंग. हेल्थ है, दो तरह के व्यूज हैं, डेवलप डेवलपिंग. ऑलराइट, और कंप्लीटली इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन जब देखना शुरू करोगे तो समझ में आएगा कि कुछ चीजें साथ साथ आगे बढ़ती रही है. तो 2016 में ये न्यूज में क्यों आया कि इट इवॉल्व्ड इनटू अ फॉर्मल प्रोग्राम ऑफ फूड एंड एग्रीकल्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इन 2016. ऑलराइट, और ये बेसिकली, और दूसरा बेसिक्स है, जब भी कुछ पढ़ रहे होते हो तो बेसिक्स ऐसे आते हैं आपके सामने. अब बाकी पढ़ने का टाइम तो है नहीं. जीआईएचएस को कैसे डिफाइन करता है एफएओ? रिमार्केबल लैंड यूज सिस्टम्स and landscape which are rich in globally significant biological diversity evolving from the co-adaptation of a community with its environment and its needs and aspirations for sustainable development. All right, तो ये एक आइडिया है. अब DIHS प्रोग्राम करता क्या है? आइडेंटिफाई एंड सेफगार्ड ग्लोबली इंपॉर्टेंट एग्रीकल्चरल हेरिटेज सिस्टम्स एंड देयर एसोसिएटेड लैंडस्केप्स. ऑप्शन दिखाई दिया यहाँ पे. ऑल राइट, सो दिस इज कमिंग फ्रॉम ऑफिशियल डॉक्यूमेंट. एक जनरल सा, सही सा, करेक्ट सा स्टेटमेंट आपको इंडिकेशन देता है कि मे बी दिस वन इज करेक्ट. वहां से आप एलिमिनेशन की तरफ जा सकते हैं. और उससे भी अच्छा तरीका यह है कि साल में रेगुलरिटी के साथ चीजों को पढ़ो. करंट अफेयर्स आए तो उसका बेसिक्स भी देख लो, राइट, एंड अंडरस्टैंड द यूपीएससी जनरली इज रिक्वायरिंग. 2022 में आ जाते हैं, राइट, बिकॉज वी हैव सीन लॉट्स ऑफ कैटेगरीज ऑफ क्वेश्चंस. 2022 यूपीएससी ने क्या पूछा? रैपिड फाइनेंसिंग इंस्ट्रूमेंट, क्रेडिट फैसिलिटी. क्या पूछा? आर रिलेटेड टू द प्रोविजंस ऑफ लेंडिंग बाय विच वन ऑफ द फॉलोइंग. ये नहीं पूछा क्या होता है, कैसे काम करता है ना. तो ये टेक्निकल डिटेल्स नहीं पूछा. पूछा अवेयरनेस. क्यों? आपने सुना होगा इसके बारे में. श्रीलंका, पाकिस्तान, बहुत सारे देश स्टाफ लेवल एग्रीमेंट्स करना चाहते हैं या कर रहे थे बिकॉज ऑफ देयर इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस. IMF is known as the lender of last resort. So meaning it has certain financing instruments which are available only in the times of crisis. All right. So हर अखबार में हिंदू, इंडियन एक्सप्रेस जो भी लिख रहा था उस बारे में ये चीजें मेंशन थी, एक्सप्लेन भी था ये क्या है. ठीक है. तो यूपीएससी ने लेकिन पूछा क्या आपसे कि भाई अखबार पढ़ रहे होगे तो इतना तो याद रहेगा ना कि ये मैंने पढ़ा था इसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, आई रेड दिस इन दिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट. सो दैट्स व्हाई लुकिंग एट द क्वेश्चन गिव्स यू अ रियलिटी चेक कि आपकी तैयारी हवा में तो नहीं हो रही है वो वीडियोस देख के रॉयल एंट्री के. ऑल राइट. और बाकी जो भी लोग अपनी अपनी सलाह देते रहते हैं, हर किसी को यूपीएससी के बारे में पता है, हर किसी को यूपीएससी के बारे में पता है कि आईएएस कैसे बिहेव करता है. ऑल राइट. क्या होता है क्या नहीं होता है. तो ये माइथोलॉजी है. दिस इज बेसिकली what UPSC is telling you. Now basics, this is a year of G20. साल भर G20 के बारे में पढ़ोगे, कुछ ना कुछ जानने को मिलेगा. G20 से 2-3 सवाल यूपीएससी पूछ चुका है. बेसिक क्या है किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का, क्या है ये ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, कब बना, क्या करता है, कौन मेंबर्स हैं. दिस इज द बेसिक. दिस इज व्हाट वी कॉल स्ट्रक्चरल इंफॉर्मेशन. राइट. क्या करता है इज मैंडेट. राइट. एंड जनरली कोई भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्या करता है बहुत ही टेरिबली टेक्निकल नहीं होता. Economic organizations would be either working to enhance cooperation in economic matters or discuss macroeconomic issues, all right, or enhance the lives of people involved in that organization. तो generally mandate जो है बहुत मुश्किल काम नहीं है. स्ट्रक्चर से सवाल आते हैं. स्ट्रक्चर में कुछ फैक्ट्स हैं जो जाने लायक को. कितने मेंबर है, 20 मेंबर है, मतलब 19 कंट्रीज एंड यूरोपियन यूनियन. यूरोपियन कमीशन रिप्रेजेंट्स द यूरोपियन यूनियन हियर. 20 देशों के सारे नाम याद रखना जरूरी है. तो ये आपकी तैयारी के तरीके पर डिपेंड करता है. आप याद कर सकते हो तो मैं क्यों रोकूंगा आपको, आप याद कर लो, मैं नहीं रोकूंगा. लेकिन अगर आप याद नहीं कर सकते हो तो यूपीएससी कभी नहीं कहता सब याद करना है. ऑलराइट. क्या G20 मेंबर्स, सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है इसका. 85% ऑफ ग्लोबल जीडीपी इज रिप्रेजेंटेड बाय दीज कंट्रीज, 75% ऑफ ग्लोबल ट्रेड, 2/3 ऑफ world population. So it means this is a club, grouping of countries who are significant economically. Thereby what you need to know is that A, what is India specific. So India is part of G20 since 1999 when G20 was formed. B, India is currently the president of G20. It assumed presidency in December 2022 after the Bali summit. तो Bali summit last year के न्यूज में साइकिल में रहा होगा, इस साल इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में होगा. पर ये समझो G20 की मीटिंग्स होती रही हैं. G20 की समिट्स 2008 से हो रही हैं. So it means it has a history, it has a background, and it is now a continuous part of the annual cycle of events. All right, it is not something new which is happening. G20 was founded in 1999 after the Asian financial crisis as a forum for finance ministers and central bank governors to discuss global economic and financial issues, including the idea of what reforms are required in global architecture of financial governance, IMF, World Bank, etc. Right? Corruption जैसे issues या poverty जैसे issues, right? ये या फिर अब देखो अगर Basel norms या global minimum corporate tax. So G20 is doing what? It is first creating consensus among those who matter. There may be 193 members of UN. But if these 20 countries agree, it would be easier to take major economic actions at the global stage. So that's why groupings like G20 are formed. Narrower membership, common purpose, better chances of reaching a consensus, right? Which generally is lacking at larger organizations like WTO with 164 member countries, right? Now, the G20 was upgraded to the level of heads of state government meeting, meaning summits, in the wake of global financial crisis of 2007. And in 2009, it was designated the premium forum for international economic cooperation. Right? So, अब ये basic जान गए तो इसके आगे क्या बचता है? इसके आगे बचता है G20 initiatives. Right? So, you are in this year where India is the president. So, obviously, the initiatives of this year are going to be very important. All right, whether G20 comes up with a package deal or a joint statement or not, but there are a lot of things which G20 can address. For example, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the resultant economic crisis, or the resultant energy crisis, or the resultant food security issues, right? But more importantly, India says that we would take care that the voices of the global south, meaning development issues, are also reflected, meaning द रिकवरी फ्रॉम कोविड जनरेटेड इकोनॉमिक स्लम्प। ठीक है, तो इन सारी चीजों पे बात होगी, तो G20 या किसी भी फोरम पे बात होती है, बात से क्या निकलता है, एग्रीमेंट, right? So that's where agreements may become important. If G20 announces a new initiative in that particular year current affairs cycle, you realize that that initiative may be important for the examination. And what kind of question? Awareness based question is what UPSC is going to ask. So here is a question that UPSC asked on G20 in 2020. All right. Now look at this question. In which one of the following groups are all the 4 countries members of G20? It's basically a straight option based question, made complicated by the list that you have to deal with. And your mind is not very good at dealing with lists. All right. But your mind is very good at identifying pattern. आंसर देख लिया आपने A. आपने दिया अगर आंसर A तो आंसर A करेक्ट है। अब आंसर A में एक देश है अर्जेंटीना। The question has been asked in 2020. There is a concept of troika in G20 and many groupings which do not have very concrete formal structure like a secretariat. So troika is the immediate past president Indonesia, the current president India, and the incoming president which is Brazil, right? So similarly 2020 में summit कहाँ हुई थी? Summit तो हुई होगी, current affairs ने cover किया होगा। 2020 summit was headed by Saudi Arabia, virtual summit थी। 2019 summit was at Osaka. 2018 summit was in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So if you are part of the current affairs cycle, if you are preparing, you know that Argentina definitely is a member, because I remember that in 2018 the summit took place in Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina. So even if you don't know all the countries whether they are member or not, this one name helped you in identifying the correct option. You don't need to remember 20 names. You need to be regular with something like a G20. हर साल cover होता है और हर साल ये basic information है, what is the troika, all right? और एक साल की summit देख रहे हो तो देख लो हमेशा पिछले 2-3 साल की summit कहाँ हुई थी, right? So that is how it would be helpful. Now 2022, the question that I mentioned, Afghanistan was in news. Afghanistan was in news and it elicited a lot of interest. A lot of people, especially students, were talking as though they are responsible for making the foreign policy and military policy of this country. क्या करना चाहिए, चिंतित हो गए। तो चिंता पालना आपकी बीमारी है। As I said, universe is indifferent. Foreign policy is indifferent to what you are thinking at this moment. I'm sorry. आप अपने को बहुत वैल्यू देते होंगे, अभी आपकी वैल्यू बियॉन्ड अ ह्यूमन बीइंग नहीं है। Of course, every human being is valuable, but beyond that, you are not at a stage where your advice is required on the matters of foreign policy or military policy. IAFS में भी जाओगे तो आगे कुछ सालों बाद, IAS भी बनोगे तो आगे कुछ सालों बाद, है ना? So realize who you are, what your role is. Your job becomes easier. So IR पढ़ने के साथ प्रॉब्लम ये होती है कि लोग फॉरेन पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए IR पढ़ रहे हैं, ग्लोबल प्रॉब्लम्स को सॉल्व करने के लिए IR पढ़ रहे हैं, है ना? जो वर्ल्ड मिस वर्ल्ड जैसे कॉम्पिटिशन्स में एक सवाल होता है कि व्हाट डू यू वांट टू अचीव, वर्ल्ड पीस। Now world peace is a noble goal to achieve, but it is a very complicated goal to achieve. So why set yourself complicated tasks? Why are you making foreign policy? Why do you feel like you have to respond to China or Pakistan? AC चला दें, AC चला दीजिए भाई। मैं तो चला नहीं सकता, मेरे पास रिमोट नहीं है, चल जाएगा, है ना? आप ले सकते हैं, बिल्कुल आप ले लीजिए, सारे डिसीजन ले लीजिए मेरी तरफ से, पर मेरी बात पे ध्यान दीजिए, राइट? सो व्हाट इज इट दैट यूपीएससी इज टेलिंग यू? When something is coming in news, especially a conflict, it's too complicated a situation where UPSC would not like to put you in difficulty. UPSC इतना बेरहम नहीं है, all right? So UPSC would expect that you are aware and you go back to the basics. So whenever there is a conflict, the basic is geography. All right, you keep on talking about complicated terms like geopolitics, geostrategy, और आजकल हर वीडियो में कोई भी हर अपनी बात को भारी दिखाना हो तो उसमें लगा देता है geostrategy, geopolitics, और आपका दिमाग उसमें घूमता रहता है। पुतिन क्या कर रहे हैं, है ना? टैंक किधर से आ रहे हैं, ये इस पे दिन रात रेडियो टेलीविजन सारे लोग चल रहे हैं, सबकी दुकानें चल रही हैं, तो आपके पास इतना टाइम नहीं है। आप पॉडकास्ट के होस्ट नहीं है, आपको कोई न्यूज चैनल नहीं चलाना है, तो आप भैया आपके पास किस बात की जल्दी है? वाई आर यू इन अ हरी? वाई डोंट यू गो बैक टू द ड्राइंग बोर्ड एंड गो बैक टू द बेसिक्स? So basics is, UPSC tells you whenever there is a conflict like situation, the basic is geography. countries surrounding a particular country, major geographical feature like the river Dnipro, which flows right through Ukraine, all right, or the Black Sea, right, यूक्रेन के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में. यहां पे अफगानिस्तान के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्यों ये चेंज हो जाएगा? तालिबान क्या कर रहा है, क्या कर रहा है, क्या नहीं कर रहा है, इज इट अ टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, इज इट नॉट अ टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, ये यूपीएससी आपसे नहीं पूछने जा रहा है, ऑल राइट. यूपीएससी उसका कुछ बेसिक पूछेगा, एंड दैट बेसिक वुड ऑलवेज बी कवर्ड इन द न्यूज आर्टिकल्स दैट यू आर रीडिंग. बट इट्स अ डिफरेंट थिंग दैट यू आर रीडिंग समथिंग एल्स, जिसमें आपका इंटरेस्ट है. आप पूरा आर्टिकल भी नहीं पढ़ रहे, आप कभी ये भी नहीं पढ़ते कि अकॉर्डिंग टू द स्पोक्स पर्सन ऑफ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स, दैट इज इंडियाज पोजीशन, दैट इज द ओनली थिंग दैट यू कैन नो, दैट इज द ओनली थिंग दैट यू आर सपोज टू नो, राइट. तो एटलीस्ट से सिंपल खेलते हुए आप इस तरह के सवाल का जवाब दे सकते हैं. अजरबैजान इज अ कॉकेशियन कंट्री, नो क्वेश्चन, इट बीइंग क्लोज टू अफगानिस्तान, राइट. देन किर्गिजिस्तान, ताजिकिस्तान, तुर्कमेनिस्तान, उज्बेकिस्तान. समझ लो आप, आपने तो देखा ही होगा मैप, आंसर आपके पास होगा. ये साल भी बीत गया, सिंपल सी एक्सरसाइज करनी थी, मैप पे देखना था, देखा नहीं देखा, ऑल राइट. लेकिन ये अभी तो हम केवल क्वेश्चन देख रहे हैं कि किस तरह क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी पूछता है. लोकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन inspired by developments of international relation, because there was a lot of interest in that particular news, so it was covered a lot, and when it was covered a lot, a UPSC aspirant should have focused on the basics, all right, rather than becoming an expert. जैसा मैंने कहा था, ऐसा ही एक सवाल यूपीएससी पहले भी पूछ चुका है, ये वही सवाल है. Consider the following: Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Missile Technology Control Regime, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India is a member of which of the above? Repetition आ गया? All right, only the information change. All these three are in news, right? अगर तीन नहीं है तो दो तो होंगे ही, right? Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, same provenance as NDB. 2014 the decision to establish is taken, 2016 it is launched. NDB का भी same case है. Headquarter है AIIB का बीजिंग में, all right? NDB का headquarter है शंघाई में. Now NDB is based on equal shareholding, at least as of now. Eventually, when it is expanded, the provision is that in no case the shareholding of original BRICS countries goes down below 50%. All right, NDB is expanding. Bangladesh, UAE, Egypt, Uruguay have been accepted as new members. ठीक है? AIIB is based on shareholding, differential shareholding formula since the very beginning. China is the largest shareholder, India is the second largest shareholder. So we know that India is a member of AIIB. Missile Technology Control Regime, it is one of the four what are called the MECR, Multilateral Export Control Regimes. Technology is very tightly controlled. The transfer of technology is very tightly controlled. NPT is an example of it. It is not easy to acquire, for example, nuclear technology. All right, apart from NPT, you have groups of countries like the NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group, 1974 में बना. Now these countries control the supply of nuclear technology, nuclear fuel, because they are the producers of nuclear fuel, or they control the nuclear technology. They are the important suppliers. So these are called MECR, Multilateral Export Control Regimes, right? What are those? NSG is there, right? 1974. Then you have the Australia group, right, coming into existence in the 1980s. Then you have the MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime, all right, which came into existence around 1989. And then you have the Wassenaar arrangement. Wassenaar arrangement is basically about traditional weapons, small weapons. So all these groupings are doing what? Since they are the major suppliers, they are exchanging information. And maybe they can also influence decisions on which country gets access to these weapons or these technologies, right? MTCR aims to control proliferation of the missile technology, right? Or aerial vehicle technology. Specifically, if it can carry 300 kgs of payload to 500 kilometers. All right? So ये basically MTCR का आपने सब जान लिया, बहुत complicated चीजें भी जान ली, ठीक है? यूपीएससी ने सवाल क्या पूछा? Is India a member or not? So India is not a member of NSG. India is still seeking to be a member of NSG. India became a member of the Australia group, MTCR, and also the Wassenaar. So now India is a member of all these three MECRs. India is not a member of NSG, right? Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it's a regional organization in Eurasia comprising mainly countries of Central Asia, countries of South Asia, and two of the permanent members of the Security Council, Russia and China, right? 4 countries of Central Asia, barring Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is not a member of SCO. All the other 4 countries are. And in South Asia, India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan joined in 2017. All right. So that's the latest edition. Formed in 2001, following the initiative called Shanghai 5, which was initiated in 95-96 by China as a security dialogue among the neighboring countries. So from Shanghai 5 in 96 to in 2001, SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, rooted in security cooperation, but now aims to promote political, economic, cultural, energy cooperation among its member countries. Right? It has 2 important highest level meetings. One is called Meeting of the Council of Heads of States. That is generally the summit which is in news. All right. And another is called Council of Heads of Governments. That is another summit which is not so much in news, barring the fact in 2019 India had hosted the meeting of Council of Heads of Governments of SCO. This year India heads the SCO and India would be hosting both the meetings, right? But India mainly would be hosting the meeting of Council of Heads of States. All right. So India is a member of this organization. Itna aapko pata hai. This organization is located in, or secretariat is in Beijing, not in Shanghai, but in Beijing. Right. It has another permanent structure called RATS, Regional Anti-Terrorism Structure, which is an expert body. Its job is to collate information, collect information on things like radicalization, movement of radicals, movement of terrorists, drug trafficking, etc. Right? It is located in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. But still, what is the question? India is a member or not? कैमरे में मैं दिख नहीं रहा, बोर्ड तो दिख रहा है ना? ओके, मैं भी दिखने लगूंगा. ये क्वेश्चन भी पिछले साल पूछा है. Vietnam, a country specific question. Consider the following statement. Vietnam has been one of the fastest growing economies in the world in the recent years. जो भी थोड़ा बहुत भी अखबार पढ़ता है वो ये बात जानता है. It's a common sensical point. It is among the fastest growing economies. Right? Vietnam is led by a multi-party political system. If you have read world history, you know that there is something called Vietnam War. This is a war in which North and South Vietnam, backed by different superpowers, are fighting each other. And this war ends in humiliation for the United States around 1974. And since then, the Vietnamese have reunified. Vietnam remains under a one-party system. All right, Vietnam is a communist party state. So इसलिए यहाँ से एक और जानकारी मिलती है. केवल कम्युनिस्ट होना ये तय नहीं करता कि उस देश से आपकी दोस्ती होगी या नहीं होगी. राइट? सो कई बार लोगों को ये ऑब्सेशन हो जाता है. तो IR को पढ़ने के कई तरीके हैं. Vietnam's economic growth is linked to its integration with global supply chains and focus on exports. Correct? Anyone who knows or read और अभी बात कर रहे हैं RCEP के बारे में या इतने सालों से या global supply chains या supply chain integration या supply chain resilience, you know Vietnam is an export-led example. For a long time, Vietnam's low labor costs and stable exchange rates have attracted global manufacturers. It is also true. Vietnam remains a leading manufacturing country, and it's a competition for India if India wants to attract low-cost manufacturing. All right. Vietnam has the most productive e-service sector in the Indo-Pacific region. आपने कहीं पढ़ा है इस बारे में? आपके सामने ये न्यूज़ आया? नहीं आया. तो सारे के सारी सेंटेंसेस करेक्ट होना जरूरी नहीं है. ऑब्वियसली जो फिफ्थ है वो सही नहीं है. राइट? Or Vietnam has been one of the fastest growing economies in the world in recent years. Vietnam is led by a multi-party system, so ये भी सही नहीं है. Right? तो अब आपने डिटरमिन कर लिया, और ये प्योरली कॉमन सेंसिकल क्वेश्चन था, प्योरली सिंपल जनरल रीडिंग पे बेस्ड था. इसमें कुछ भी टेक्निकल यूपीएससी ने इंक्लूड नहीं किया. अगर आप बना ले अपनी रीडिंग से, हाँ मैं आता हूँ आपके पास आता हूँ, पहले पूरा कर लूँ इसको. आप बना ले अगर अपनी रीडिंग से कॉम्प्लिकेटेड इसको, तो वो आपके ऊपर है. बट यूपीएससी हैज डन नथिंग कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हियर, नथिंग कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हियर. Right? Now, with reference to United Nations Credentials Committee, consider the following. Again, this question may seem to be difficult. It is not something that is talked about often, but any course teaches you about United Nations and what it does. But this is a purely current affairs question. Why? In what context did it come in news? यही बता दो, किस context में ये news में आया होगा? It again came in news in the context of Afghanistan. So, जैसा मैंने कहा कि आप बेसिक्स को छोड़ के कुछ और पढ़ रहे थे. अफगानिस्तान हैड अ ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर, राइट? पावर वाज स्नैच्ड बाय तालिबान आप बहुत चिंतित थे, ये रिकॉग्नाइज करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए, हर कोई आता था पूछने, रिकॉग्नाइज करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए, करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए। अब इसका जवाब मैं नहीं दे सकता, पहली चीज। दूसरा मैं समझाता हूं फंक्शनल एंगेजमेंट है, फंक्शनल एंगेजमेंट इज द टर्म विच विल एक्सप्लेन इट। फिर भी समझ में नहीं आता क्योंकि आपको डेफिनेटिव आंसर चाहिए। तो अखबार पढ़िए, द क्वेश्चन वॉज डेल्ट बाय यूएन ऑल्सो, यूएन ऑल्सो was posed this question, who should represent Afghanistan? Second is who should represent Myanmar, because Myanmar also had a transfer of power, military coup, all right? उस क्वेश्चन को कंसीडर किया यूएन ने, और उस जब यूएन ने कंसीडर किया तो जिनको भी इसमें इंटरेस्ट था, आई एम श्योर उन्होंने नहीं पढ़ा होगा, क्योंकि इंटरेस्ट के बाद यही होता है, इंटरेस्ट है मेरा, मुझे मेहनत करने की जरूरत थोड़ी ना है, आई एम टैलेंटेड, आईआर तो मैं बनाता हूं, ऐसा कई लोग मान के चलते हैं। तो ये जो है इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आया, और ये सवाल आप पढ़ लो, इट इज अ कमिटी सेटअप बाय यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल एंड वर्क्स अंडर इट्स सुपरविजन। बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन, अखबार पढ़ा होता तो पहले ही ये स्टेटमेंट गलत है। जनरल असेंबली मैंडेटेड है जो क्रिएट करती है, क्रेडेंशियल का सवाल जनरल असेंबली देखती है। क्रेडेंशियल मतलब आप रिप्रेजेंट जिसको कर रहे हैं, क्या आपके पास आप लीगली एंटाइटल्ड हैं, यानी आप कोई कागजात दिखाते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल एम्बेसडर्स व्हेन दे आर अपॉइंटेड, they come and present their credentials to the honorable president of India, right? तो ये एक प्रोसेस है, डिप्लोमेटिक कर्टसी है, डिप्लोमेटिक प्रोसेस है। It traditionally meets in March, June and September every year. It assesses the credentials of all UN members before submitting a report to the General Assembly for approval, right? So ये पहला, some of you may apply common sense, but it is a reflection of what happens when you read newspaper. Because if you're reading newspaper, this is a news of December 2, 2021, all right? तो बहुत सारे लोग दिसंबर के आसपास क्या करते हैं, एक चीज चिंता है ना, उनकी चिंता बढ़ जाती है, प्री आ रहा है, किसी ने बोला कि चिंता ज्यादा करो एग्जाम में, या फिर अपना तरीका चेंज करो, जैसे पीटी की तरफ जाओ, ओरिएंटेशन चेंज करो, ज्यादा क्वेश्चन सॉल्व करो, इंफॉर्मेशन को क्वेश्चन फॉर्म में देखो, ये कर सकते हो। पर चिंता करना एक कॉमन सबका शौक है, करते हैं। ये न्यूज अगर आप पढ़ते, इसी न्यूज के अंदर आपको ये बात मिल जाती है, दैट यूएन क्रेडेंशियल्स कमिटी कंसिडर्ड दिस क्वेश्चन। नाउ यू सी, इफ यू गो बैक इन बेसिक्स, बेसिक्स में लुक लाइक दिस, दिस इज रूल्स ऑफ प्रोसीजर, राइट? अब चलो या तो यहां से पढ़ लो, जो पढ़ना चाहते हो, एक लाइन यहां पढ़ो, 28A, क्रेडेंशियल्स कमिटी शैल बी अपॉइंटेड एट द बिगिनिंग ऑफ ईच सेशन ऑफ जनरल असेंबली स्टार्ट्स इन September. It shall consist of 9 members who shall be appointed by the General Assembly on the proposal of the President. तो क्वेश्चन देख के भी एक आइडिया लगता है, क्वेश्चन गलत हो गया कोई बात नहीं, पर इफ यू लॉस्ट द लेसन ऑफ इट, वो थोड़ा बुरी बात है। ऑल राइट, लेसन इज दिस इज द काइंड ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन दैट आई फाइंड इन यूपीएससी क्वेश्चंस। सो देयर बाय इन फ्रॉम द इंफॉर्मेशन इन फ्रंट ऑफ मी, आई वुड पे अटेंशन टू दिस काइंड ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, मीटिंग्स, अपॉइंटमेंट्स, ऑल राइट? ठीक है, FATF 3 बार मिलता है साल में, बाय द वे, राइट? इन February, June एंड October द प्लेनरी मीटिंग ऑफ FATF टेक्स प्लेस। यहां पे ऐसी एक इंफॉर्मेशन थी, पर आपको क्लियरली इंफॉर्मेशन मिल गई। या तो रूल बुक पढ़ लो, बेसिक पढ़ने का शौक है तो, लेकिन नहीं, वीडियो देखेंगे, ऑल राइट? वीडियो, क्योंकि पैसिव कंजम्पशन की आदत हो गई है, उसमें कुछ नहीं जाता हमारा, और ना हम कुछ सीखते हैं। फीलिंग जरूर आती है, फील गुड कि सीख लिया, आज तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट सीख लिया। Unless you apply yourself to something, it doesn't become your property. Knowledge cannot be bought, no matter how much fee you pay. Fee only buys you access. It doesn't buy knowledge. ठीक है, नॉलेज के लिए तो अपने को अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा, कैसे भी कर लो, क्लास से सीख के कर लो या खुद से कर लो। सो अखबार पढ़ रहे होते हो, यही इंफॉर्मेशन appears in this form. A credentials committee is appointed at the beginning of each regular session of General Assembly. It consists of 9 members who are appointed by General Assembly on the proposal of the President. The committee reports to the Assembly on the credentials of representatives. हो गया आंसर, ऑप्शन में तो यही पूछा था यूपीएससी ने। सो अगेन आई विल से इट्स प्योरली अवेयरनेस बेस्ड क्वेश्चन, बिकॉज यूपीएससी ऑप्शन ही ऐसे सेट करता है। पहले ही आपको बोला है कि ये सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल अपॉइंट करता है, तो कुछ नहीं पता होगा आपको कोई भी टेक्स्ट पढ़ने के बाद, तो ये तो पता होगा ना कि जनरल असेंबली है। So you start eliminating, all right? And the whole task is to enable yourself to solve the questions, maximum number of questions as required by any which way. अपना मेथड ढूंढो, right? हाँ साहब, अब आपका कोई सवाल था, हाथ खड़ा किया था आपने। ई सर्विस सेक्टर हाउ टू डिफर फ्रॉम सर्विस सेक्टर। पहला तो ये सवाल कहां से आया मुझे समझ में नहीं आता, लेकिन चलिए पिछले साल का सवाल था, अब ई जोड़ दिया तो ई का मतलब इलेक्ट्रॉनिक ट्रांसमिशन से है, ई कॉमर्स से है। जब ट्रेड और ट्रांजैक्शन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीन से हो रहा है तो वो हो गया ई कॉमर्स। और सर्विसेज के अंदर तो बहुत सारे मोड्स हैं, जैसे WTO 4 मोड ऑफ ट्रेड इन सर्विसेज कहता है, उसमें से एक है मूवमेंट ऑफ नेचुरल पर्संस, ऑलराइट, विच इज व्हेन आई गो एंड वर्क इन सम अदर कंट्री, इट इज अ सर्विस एक्सपोर्ट, राइट, बिकॉज आई एम अर्निंग इन फॉरेन करेंसी, रिपैट्रिएटिंग सम ऑफ इट बैक टू माई कंट्री। तो सर्विसेज का मतलब हो गया जो आप जनरली सर्विसेज से समझते हैं, व्हेन बेसिक एक्सचेंज इज हैपनिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ सर्विसेज प्रोवाइडेड, नॉट गुड्स। ठीक है, तो ई जोड़ गया उसमें तो सिंपल मतलब है इलेक्ट्रॉनिक ट्रांसमिशन से जो हो रहा है। ठीक, समझ गए आप इस बात को? ये बहुत ज्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड था नहीं, आप कॉमन सेंस से भी दिमाग लगा के इसका आंसर निकाल सकते हैं। चलिए, बट बहरहाल थैंक यू फॉर द क्वेश्चन। एक और क्वेश्चन देख लेते हैं, लोकेशन बेस्ड। लोकेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन है 2022 का। विच वन ऑफ द फॉलोइंग स्टेटमेंट बेस्ट रिफ्लेक्ट्स द इशू व्हिच सनकाकू आइलैंड समटाइम्स मेंशन्ड इन द न्यूज। इन द न्यूज, मैं तो हर साल ये पढ़ाता हूँ, हर साल ये न्यूज में रहता है, साउथ चाइना सी, ये सम जियोग्राफीज आर ऑलवेज इन न्यूज, अपने से भी कर सकते हैं आप। तो सेनकाकू इज द सेम आइलैंड विच द चाइनीज कॉल डियाओऊ, एंड चाइनीज आर क्लेमिंग दिस आइलैंड। सो इन वन सेंस इट इज अबाउट टेरिटोरियल डिस्प्यूट ओवर दिस आइलैंड बिटवीन चाइना एंड जापान, वेयर ईस्ट चाइना सी। सो ऑप्शन देख के ही पता चल रहा है ईस्ट चाइना सी, साउथ चाइना सी, मीनिंग सम जियोग्राफीज आर इंपॉर्टेंट, सम जियोग्राफीज आर इंपॉर्टेंट। करंट अफेयर्स क्या करता है? इट ब्रिंग्स इट इनटू न्यूज साइकिल। In what context? China has been in news, Japan has been in news, China is an important relation for India, Japan is an important partner for India. तो ये सारी चीजें मिला के आप ये तय कर सकते हैं कि यूपीएससी IR के लेवल पे एग्जाम में क्या पूछेगा, राइट? सो नथिंग कॉम्प्लिकेटेड, राइट? एरियाज ऑफ क्वेश्चन फाइनली, एरियाज ऑफ क्वेश्चन, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में पब्लिकेशंस, मीटिंग्स, बेसिक्स ऑफ एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कैन बी इजिली डिसर्न इफ यू आर रीडिंग न्यूज़पेपर और कोई किताब पढ़ लें, कोई स्पेशल मटेरियल पढ़ लें, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता क्या पढ़ रहे, इंफॉर्मेशन सिमिलर है। लोकेशन बेसिकली प्लेसेस इन न्यूज, ऑलराइट, न्यूज बिकॉज ऑफ मीटिंग्स, बिकॉज ऑफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स। Relation, country specific information, either about India and relation with that country or about that country itself, right? Just as we saw Vietnam related question. Agreements, all right? So agreement related question, again there have been RCEP related question, but RCEP related question भी उसमें कुछ technical नहीं पूछता UPSC, all right? FAO का GIHS system भी एक agreement related question है, all right? एक agreement से ही आया है वो। So agreement related question, mostly inspired by current affairs. So it is inspired by current affairs. इसका मतलब ये है कि टेक्स्ट में जो है केवल वही आ जाएगा, अंत क्लास के अंत में सभी आते हैं, बहुत सारे लोग आते हैं, वो कहते हैं इतना कर लेंगे तो हो जाएगा। भाई मैं अपने लिए इंडेमनिटी चाहता हूं, मैं ये गारंटी नहीं दे सकता कि इतना कर लेंगे हो जाएगा, पर क्या और सोचा है आपने करने के लिए? अगर कुछ और नहीं सोचा है तो कम से कम ये कर लो, ऑलराइट? सो ऑलवेज फोकस ऑन डूएबिलिटी। आइडियाज तो बहुत फैंटास्टिक है हम सभी के पास, द प्रॉब्लम ऑलवेज इज इन एग्जीक्यूशन, है ना? शार्क टैंक वाले भी यही कहते रहते हैं। डॉक्टर जयंत नार्लिकर थे, प्रोफेसर जयंत नार्लिकर, ग्रेट एस्ट्रोफिजिसिस्ट, वो भी ये कहते थे कि जब भी हवाई जहाज में यात्रा करो, लोग ब्लैक होल के बारे में थ्योरीज लेके आ जाते हैं, ये आप इस लाइन में काम करो। अब जयंत नार्लिकर हिमसेल्फ इज एन एस्ट्रोफिजिसिस्ट, आप उनको सलाह दे रहे हैं कि इस लाइन पे काम करो, राइट? तो ये एक आदत है हमारी, और यूपीएससी प्रिपरेशन बहुत सारी आदतों को छोड़ने के लिए भी है। अनलर्न टू लर्न फर्स्ट, अनलर्निंग इज अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट टास्क, लर्निंग इज इजी, ठीक है? तो ये हो गया एरियाज ऑफ क्वेश्चन। नाउ टाइप्स ऑफ क्वेश्चन, सिंपल 4 ऑप्शंस, ऑलराइट, स्टेटमेंट, इंफॉर्मेशन, सिलेक्शन बाय कोड, these kinds of questions, and matches, which is a variant of the previous one. ये इंफॉर्मेशन क्या बहुत ज्यादा इंफॉर्मेशन है? नाउ हमारे पास जो फंक्शनल इंफॉर्मेशन है वो 3, 4, 5, 6 पॉइंट में है, बट उसके लिए हमको बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन देखने पड़े ना। सो दैट्स द प्रोसेस ऑफ प्रिपरेशन ऑल्सो, राइट? So I have a suggestion that kindly prefer English, as some students are facing difficulty in understanding the content in Hindi. I'm not talking about the content in Hindi, I'm only using some connecting verbs, right, to connect with the audience, that's it, right? Because one of the biggest difficulty is that you have opted for English medium, but you are comfortable with Hindi, so you only feel comfortable when somebody is speaking in Hindi. Then what happens? Your disconnect starts from the subject, from the class. आप ये नहीं समझते कि तैयारी करके by preparing you are not doing a favor on anyone. It's your task to take interest rather than anyone's task to get you interested, right? Because it is your vanity project, right? UPSC ने तो नहीं कहा कि आप नहीं आए तो देश का कल्याण नहीं होगा. You decided, so take interest. All right, so this is basically something that I wanted to share with you. Now, suggestion क्या है मेरा, right? Before we cover the content, suggestion ये बहुत ही 3 चीजें हैं. Look at the previous year's question to understand UPSC expectations, rather than sharing opinion among yourself. Exam हर साल exam के बाहर 2-4 लोग मिल जाएंगे जो कहेंगे इस बार कट ऑफ इतना होगा, इस बार कट ऑफ इतना होगा. उनसे बिल्कुल भी संबंध रखने की जरूरत नहीं है. Because it's a waste of time to think about things which you don't control, right? So questions ही बताते हैं कि UPSC क्या expect कर रहा है. पैटर्न 10-12 साल देख के पता चलता है. पिछले साल ये क्वेश्चन पूछे थे, इस साल ये पूछे, रिएक्शन लिया किसी ने वीडियो लगा के कि वो भैया पहला अटेम्प्ट दे रहा है, उससे पूछ लिया कि कैसा पेपर था, उसने बोला पिछले साल से मुश्किल था, और साहब ने कह दिया कि UPSC का पेपर बहुत मुश्किल आया. पैटर्न चेंज हो गया. इतने बड़े बड़े प्रेडिक्शन से बचें, राइट? सेव योरसेल्फ फ्रॉम दीज ग्रैंड प्रेडिक्शंस. डू थिंग्स विच यू कैन. रीड द कंटेंट, ये तो सबके लिए जॉब है. जो भी कंटेंट है PT 365 का डॉक्यूमेंट पढ़ें. स्किम द इंफॉर्मेशन बाय एनी लेंस. क्वेश्चन पेपर देखा, सिलेबस देखा, यू ऑलरेडी हैव द लेंस. यूज द प्रैक्टिस क्विज प्रोवाइडेड. सो विद द डॉक्यूमेंट, of course there is a QR code through which you will be provided some practice quiz. I have already shown you a lot of UPSC questions, and wherever possible I will also show you question with the content. This is the process, and keep on repeating it. There is no secret to preparing for UPSC examination. How to succeed, I don't know. As people say, success has thousands of fathers. All right, and failure is a orphan. Right? So I am not telling you how to succeed. I am only telling you how to prepare. How do you go about it to manage your task? So let's move forward and let's look at the content from what it is, right? And I will start with a question. As I said, make your own questions. You may have read a lot of things. बहुत सारी चीजें आपके बाद दिमाग में आई होंगी. आपने कुछ ये मेंशन पढ़ा होगा. शायद ये इंफॉर्मेशन यहाँ पे ना हो. तवांग mentioned है in the context of China, India, first point in the content. Tawang is located. आसान था. Atlas सबके पास था. Atlas था आपके पास. You would have looked at it. नहीं. The westernmost part of Arunachal Pradesh, the westernmost part of Bhutan, east of Sela Range, north of the Tibetan Plateau. Westernmost part of Arunachal Pradesh. Does UPSC ask this kind of question? Yes, UPSC asks this kind of a question. All right. It is on the westernmost part of Arunachal Pradesh, but when you look at Bhutan, it is towards the east of Bhutan. All right. When you look at Sela Range, it is towards the west of Sela Range. All right. Sela Range, and it is not north of the Tibetan Plateau, but actually the southern flank of the Tibetan Plateau. UPSC simply asks these kinds of questions, which we will see. Now you may look at the map, all right, and most of the times the maps are misused to make things unnecessarily complicated. So what do we need to know about India-China border? So the news was that there was some confrontation at the LAC, this time in the Tawang sector, which is in Arunachal Pradesh. So the basic is India-China relation, and the basic here is border issue in India-China relation. That is what the content aims to provide to you. You look at this map, 3 simple ideas that this border, as we refer to it as, from India's perception, is 3,488 kilometers long. All right. It is, from the perspective of management, divided in 3 sectors, 3 prominent sectors. One is this, the western sector. This is called the western sector, mainly the eastern Ladakh region. All right. So this is the western sector. Now the middle sector. Middle sector comprises of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. All right. And this is the eastern sector. This is the eastern sector. Right. Eastern sector coincides with Arunachal Pradesh, the boundary in Arunachal Pradesh. Sikkim has a special case because China no longer contests this border. After gradually 2003 to 2005, China started showing Sikkim to be part of India. Before that, it used to show Sikkim separately, right? So as of now, we don't consider an active border dispute here. And in the classification, we generally talk about the western sector, middle sector and the eastern sector. ठीक है? ये देख लिया आपने. Places in news, right? तवांग तो यहाँ पे है. This is तवांग, right? Very close to Bhutan, important extension of or surrounded by the Tibetan plateau, right? और आप अरुणाचल का मैप देख सकते थे अगर आप चाहें तो. वो इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन में नहीं आता. डोमेस्टिक एक्सरसाइज है, ज्योग्राफी के लिए भी मैप देखते होगे. सिंपली मैप देखने की एक एक्सरसाइज आपको ये बता देती, इतना काफी है इससे. ठीक है, इतनी इंफॉर्मेशन काफी है. अननेसेसरी इंफॉर्मेशन क्या है वो भी मैं बता दूंगा. राइट, ट्राई टू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन. यूपीएससी मोस्ट प्रोबेबली वुड नॉट आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन. ऑलराइट, बट या दिस इज द क्वेश्चन जिसमें आप लोगों का इंटरेस्ट होता होगा शायद. जॉनसन लाइन 1865, Johnson-Ardagh line 1897, McCartney-MacDonald line 1899, McMahon line 1914. Question is how many pairs given above are matched correctly or matched. ऐसा पिछले साल से यूपीएससी ने ये ऑप्शन देना शुरू कर दिया. राइट, फॉर द ईज ऑफ लर्निंग ऑल ऑफ देम आर करेक्ट. ऑल राइट, ईज ऑफ लर्निंग, क्योंकि आपको नहीं पता है तो प्रैक्टिस करने से एक और चीज होती है. व्हेन यू आर प्रैक्टिसिंग, when you mark something wrong, that is not the end of the story, because it's not actually a vanity project. Your decision to become an IAS may be a vanity project, but preparation cannot be a vanity project. All right, preparation would like your application. So once you have solved a question, whether you mark things correctly or whether you mark things incorrectly, you need to know what went right and what went wrong, so that you develop the habit of doing right things consistently and avoiding doing wrong things consistently. Second thing which happens is, आपको नहीं पता था इससे पहले, अब आपको पता है. Once you have practiced, once you have solved something, you already know it. So that is how you cover the information also. Please understand this. It's all correct. Johnson line dates back to 1865. Johnson-Ardagh line 1897. McCartney-MacDonald line 1899. McMahon line 1914. We don't need to worry about these lines unnecessarily. इसी को कहते हैं expert बनने की कोशिश करना. All right? जब आप इस direction में जाने लगते हैं. One, you will find it very difficult to find sector specific map of the LAC, line of actual control, right? जो friction point और patrolling point के पीछे पड़े रहते हैं उनको ये भी पता होना चाहिए कि ये maps, these maps are not in the public domain. So thereby by definition it is not your responsibility to go any further in this. That is how you learn how to save your time, that you don't need to be an expert, right? और जो information public में है नहीं उसको जानने की जरूरत क्या है. But still, these are historic conceptions of border between India and China proposed by the Britishers or adopted during the British time. ठीक है? These three are about the western sector, right? The eastern Ladakh, Aksai Chin sector में इस तरह की lines अंग्रेजों ने propose की थी. Sometimes Chinese accepted it, sometimes Chinese did not respond. But you cannot say that Chinese ever accepted any of these lines, क्योंकि उसके लिए आपको evidence चाहिए कि चाइना ने कभी कहा हो कि हम accept करते हैं. ठीक है, but we can understand that conception of India may be close to one line and conception of China may be close to the other line. ठीक है, तो ये एक इंफॉर्मेशन थी. चलो अब कंटेंट पे चलते हैं. गो बैक टू द कंटेंट. राइट, क्वेश्चन के हिसाब से हमने इसको बड़ी तेजी से कवर कर लिया. क्या इंपॉर्टेंट था, राइट? वाई इन न्यूज समझने की जरूरत नहीं है. तवांग केम. So I suggested that when something like this is happening, please go back to the atlas, just look at its location. UPSC asks those kinds of questions, which are very simple questions. Now there are certain terms which are mentioned. LAC, line of actual control. So I told you, border is, the length of the border is, okay, 3,488 kilometers. Okay, but this is a disputed border. Right? So it involves at some places question of territory. In the western sector, the primary question is question of territory. We say that China illegally occupies the region of Aksai Chin and some other regions in the western sector. In the eastern sector, the problem is China's refusal to accept the settled basis of boundary in this region, which India feels was settled by the McMahon line in 1914, all right, by the signing of Simla Accord. So that is true. China has not shown a willingness to accept any British era conceptions. So the basis on which both of them have claims over border may be different. India's case is more legal, right? China's case is more strategic, all right? China advances these claims out of its strategic interests. Of course, India's strategic interests are also there, but India presents its case more in a legal way, right? These maps, these documents, right? For example, the revenue maps of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, which acceded to India, is one of the bases which showed these to be part of that territory. But independent India and independent China never agreed on their boundary. That is the problem. We assumed that boundary is clear, or sooner or later it would be clarified peacefully. It did not happen. China, which became an independent entity in the form of PRC, People's Republic of China, what kind of a country it would be, we didn't have much of an idea. But certainly frictions on border emerged, right? The war was fought in 1962, in which the Chinese invaded India and then they also withdrew, right? And then they said that both sides should withdraw 20 kilometers behind the LAC. At that point in time, there is no question of India accepting the LAC. So this should be read as 1962 में पहली बार चाइना ने LAC की बात की, right? LAC came into existence after 1962 Indo-China war is not factually correct, but interpret कर सकते हैं इसको ये मानने के लिए कि हाँ, चाइना ने पहली बार 1962 में कहा LAC, 20 kilometers behind the LAC, right? LAC in any document signed by India first time appears in 1993 when we signed a peace and tranquility agreement with China. That document and subsequent 1996 agreement, confidence building measures agreement, mentioned the term LAC. So LAC is considered to be perception based. It's a practical instrument. Till the final solution is found, we said there is something called LAC where our troops are, and what we should do is we should maintain peace and tranquility, and for that we should build confidence between the militaries on the ground, right? So this is something that created a stable framework within which negotiations for a final resolution of boundary question was also ongoing. 2022, when Galwan clashes took place, because of the fatalities involved, it became a more serious issue, and thereby the question has come into light prominently since 2020, right? So we know what LAC is. We know LAC is seen in terms of 3 sectors, all right? And now you understand that these 3 sectors are where the differences are, all right? This is where the differences lie, and that is the difference that these countries need to address by peaceful negotiations. That is what India believes should happen. What China did was unilateral aggression and thereby violation of the 1993, 1996 and subsequent agreements. That is the case that India is making. All right. Now, ये जो box है, इसको एक बार पढ़ लेना, बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Don't worry about it. As I said, वो lines वाले question मैंने यहीं से बनाए कि आपको एक year एक तरह से याद हो जाए. Boundary dispute in this sector, western sector, pertains to Johnson Line proposed by British in 1860s that extended up to the Kunlun Mountains and put Aksai Chin in then princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. Right? India uses the Johnson Line and claims Aksai Chin as its own. I mean, we don't need to state that India uses Johnson Line. ऐसा कोई ज़रूरी नहीं है कहना, ठीक है? But it's close. Our conception is close to this. All right? And China does not recognize Johnson Line and instead accepts McDonald Line, which puts Aksai Chin under its control. It's also not, entirely factually correct that China has ever accepted any of these lines, but it can be inferred that since McCartney-McDonald Line was proposed by the Britishers and it basically put Aksai Chin towards the side of China, so it may be acceptable to China. All right, that should be the proper language. It may be acceptable to China. इसलिए इसके बारे में you don't need to even remember that. All right, it's public knowledge. You already know this. What China feels or does not feel is not our concern in the examination. What is India's position? So that's why I'm saying that this you can think as a redundant information. You can think of these lines as various lines proposed by the Britishers. Whether the Chinese accepted it or not is a different question, and mostly you now can understand that China does not accept any of these lines. All right, and even if it accepts these lines are talked about as conception, they would be within the secret negotiations which are taking place. तो इसलिए हमको इनसे अपने आप को कंसर्न नहीं करना है. That's what I'm saying. ईस्टर्न सेक्टर में डिस्प्यूट क्या है? डिस्प्यूट is about China's refusal to accept McMahon line as the basis of boundary resolution, which we think prominently because it came out of an accord. These other lines are proposed by the Britishers, not part of agreement signed with China. But McMahon line came out of Simla Accord, which was signed, right? So that's basically our position on the boundary is China refuses to accept it. There is a package deal which many people talk about, which simply is an idea that at some point some Chinese maybe leaders or experts have proposed this idea that China is willing to accept India's position in the eastern sector if India accepts China's position on the western sector, which is not the case in terms of being acceptable by India. India is not going to accept it. India is saying that A, you are illegally occupying these territories, so you should withdraw. That is India's position. So unless the government through negotiations, through agreement decides to do something else, that is the position you should keep in mind. Now, border dispute settlement mechanism between India and China. 1962 beyond that, what happens was this issue went to the back burner. All right, एक बार लड़ाई हुई, लड़ाई खत्म हो गई, relations, diplomatic relations ठंडे पड़ गए. All right, the border issue itself, you know, acquired the current form, but nothing much happened there. Some skirmishes here and there, but by and large, no major armed conflict. Now the political relations are established once again, diplomatic relations in 1970s, but any attempt at reviving talks or relations did not materialize till 1988. 1988, Rajiv Gandhi visited China, he met Deng Xiaoping, a joint working group mechanism on boundary and economy was established. That is where we started talking. The result was that this process goes ahead. In 1993, India and China signed an agreement on the maintenance of peace and tranquility along the LAC. And what should India and China do? They should first ensure that there is peace and tranquility along the border. And that border for practical purposes is referred, because it is not an agreed border, it is referred to by a technical name LAC, line of actual control. It is perception based, not marked on the map. All right. 1996, agreement on confidence building measures in the military field along the LAC. This is the second agreement that we signed. So how do we maintain peace and tranquility? By ensuring that there are measures, steps taken to improve military communication. Because on the border, practically there is military. All right. So that is the agreement. Then we move forward. 2003, we sign an agreement, a declaration for the future relation between India and China. There also, border is one of the issues, right, which is identified that we need to resolve. But बातचीत अब हम कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, बातचीत कर रहे हैं, स्टेबल फ्रेमवर्क इस तरह के एग्रीमेंट क्रिएट कर रहे हैं. 2003 we started what is called special representative mechanism. एक नया mechanism, joint working group of 1988 is replaced by special representative mechanism of 2003. So special representative mechanism is where we are talking the long term final solution to the boundary question. All right, manage करने के लिए principles are coming here. Then application के लिए in 2005 we signed protocol. Protocol to do what? Protocol is an addition to already existing agreement, right? That's why even while preparing for years, people don't know what Kyoto Protocol is a protocol to what. Kyoto Protocol is a protocol to UNFCCC, which is a prior existing broader agreement. Kyoto Protocol adds details to it. So details are added. How do we do this? Through 2005 agreement. And it is about how there should be border post meetings, how there should be communication between militaries, how we should inform each other of military exercises which we conduct, and the practical details of managing the border. The process goes ahead. 2012 agreement is signed to establish a mechanism to look after the day-to-day affairs, day-to-day issues of the border, right? It is called Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on India-China Border Affairs, right? So it has representative from MEA, representative from the armed forces also, right? And this is again managing the day-to-day affairs of the border, right? When any issue arises, if it is not resolved at the level of the commanders or at the level of local militaries communicating with each other. So then it comes up at the diplomatic political level. So that is another dialogue which is added. And then border defense cooperation agreement is signed. Again, it is nothing but giving effect to these previous agreements. So it again talks about increasing number of border post meeting points. It emphasizes that when two sides are patrolling the same region and the soldiers are face to face, what should they do? So generally a flag drill or a banner drill is conducted जहाँ पे दोनों एक दूसरे को banner दिखाते हैं. All right, but heavy arms are not used. This is something that you clearly have observed. All right, so ये है agreements. Similarly, simply I told you, these agreements can be part of a chronology based question. All right, which of them were signed earlier or chronologically ascending descending order. राइट समझ गए आप, पर साथ में आपको ये भी समझ में आ गया कि ये वो एग्रीमेंट्स हैं विच आर इंस्ट्रूमेंटल व्हेन इट कम्स टू ईदर रिजॉल्विंग द बॉर्डर क्वेश्चन, बाउंड्री क्वेश्चन, और मैनेजिंग द बॉर्डर इश्यूज. ठीक है, अब चलते हैं, इसके भी आगे चलते हैं. नाउ यू सी इंडिया चाइना रिलेशन की फैक्ट्स. यहां मुझे कुछ आपको बहुत ज्यादा बताने की जरूरत नहीं, ये फैक्ट्स आपको अपने रिटेन करने के लिए क्लियरली दिए हुए हैं. सो व्हाट इज द पैटर्न? ऑफ कोर्स वी हैव अ बॉर्डर क्वेश्चन, बट वी हैव एन एंशिएंट रिलेशन. फॉर एग्जांपल सिल्क रूट was a route which connected China with the European markets, and there were tangential connects from India to this Silk Route also, right? So flow of Buddhism or visit of Fahian, Huingsang, these are all testimony of historical connect between India and China. So understand, India and China in the past thousands of years have not fought a war. All right, India-China war is only an occurrence of 20th century. All right. So that allows you to put things in perspective. We have already talked about the border, right? Now let's look at bilateral trade. Bilateral trade between India and China is more than 100 million. For example, last year around 119 million, right? This year again more than 100 million, but this year, because Chinese data is out, this year India's deficit has also crossed 100 billion. All right. So pattern is what UPSC is seeking. Pattern is that A, India-China trade has crossed 100 billion, no matter which data source you are talking about. B, there is a consistent trade deficit for India vis-a-vis China. This is the pattern. This is what I am saying as pattern. क्या आपको पता है कि ऐसा है? Right? UPSC is not going to ask you trade numbers to the last decimal point. ये नहीं होता. Right? आगे चलते हैं. Sister cities relationship. Right? So, China and India, apart from having a dialogue on border or economic engagements, also have tried this formula of improving people to people and cultural ties to reset their relation. This was evident after 2017 in two meetings which are called informal summits. First informal summit between India and China took place in 2018 in Wuhan, China. Second informal summit between India and China took place at Mahabalipuram or Mamallapuram, all right, in 2019. So through these dialogues, the idea was that leadership level dialogue in an informal setting would generate ideas and thereby give a new direction to the relation. One of the ideas which emerged after Wuhan dialogue, informal summit, the document was called Wuhan Spirit, was called 10 Pillars Agreement, meaning agreement for cooperation in people to people and cultural exchanges along 10 areas, right? Like tourism, like exchanges in traditional medicine, like cooperation in museums and archaeological sites, right? And one of the other aspect is designating cities and states as sister cities and sister states. So this is a cultural move. This is about people to people ties. We consider that such agreements promote tourism and thereby familiarity between countries. It's a soft power measure also. All right. So thereby you see sister city relationship exists between Delhi, Beijing, Ahmedabad, Guangzhou, Bengaluru, Chengdu, Kolkata, Kunming, Chennai, Quanzhou, right? And sister provinces Gujarat, Guangdong, Tamil Nadu, Fujian. ठीक है? Question कैसा हो सकता है? Pair based. All right. In the context of India-China relations, consider the following list of sister cities. Right? तो एक बार बस देख लो, highlight कर लो, 2-3 बार देख लो. एक दो भी याद हो जाएगा. If you are able to remember even 1 or 2 or 3, you would be able to apply elimination if at all a question is asked in this context. ठीक है? चलो आगे चलते हैं. Both countries are part of BRICS, SCO, RIC, WTO, UN, G20. Summary of relation मिल गई आपको. Nothing to be explained there. One China policy. Again, in the context of India, it does not have great value, but people are obsessed with this one China policy, etc., etc. So let's understand what one China policy is. First of all, it is China's policy. All right, China's policy based on China's principle of its own sovereignty and territorial integrity. Right. So it means that in its foreign relations, China expects countries to abide by one China policy, that there is only one China, there are no other claimants to China, all right. So that basically simply is China expecting other countries to respect its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Okay? So that in practical terms means that if you want to have normal diplomatic relations with PRC, People's Republic of China, you cannot have normal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, because that would be violative of China's one China policy, because now you are considering Taiwan to be a separate country, which for PRC is not the case. Now Taiwan is known as Republic of China, ROC. Their founding fathers had a dream that one day they would go back and recapture the mainland. It has not happened. Taiwan has emerged as its own independent country, independent economy, with a complicated set of relations with China. For example, a lot of investments in China, technology investments in China is from Taiwan. All right, cultural similarities are also there. So one China policy is the policy of PRC, People's Republic of China. Since 1970s, recognizing Taiwan as part of China, but it has unofficial ties with Taiwan as well. ये किसके बारे में? US के बारे में. US is an important relation for us. China is an important relation for us. So we consider it a question in the context of current affairs and in the context of relations, that you should be aware about the important countries. So US, now understand US behavior is typical great power behavior. All right. So it's very clear to me that the conception of being a friend or an enemy does not neatly fit in IR. पर सबको समझने का तरीका यही है, या तो कोई दोस्त है या कोई दुश्मन है. तो एक बहुत ही घिसी पिटी कहावत है in international relations, just indicative of how you simply understand IR, simply, without going into concepts or theories, that there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies, there are only permanent national interests. So before 1971, US has close relations with Taiwan. US is committed to the security of Taiwan. US has supported Chiang Kai-shek in his war against Mao Zedong-led Communist Party, right? So that is something there consistently as part of US policy. 1971, ping pong diplomacy, when US sends a team to China to play ping pong, table tennis. उसके बाद PRC से संबंध एस्टैब्लिश हो गए यूएस के. व्हाट हैपेंड 1972, ROC, Republic of China, Taiwan was expelled from the UNSC and its seat was assumed by PRC. All right. So when that happens, US brought about some nuance its approach. It did not completely broke off relations with Taiwan. All right. So on one level that continued, but certainly it was of lesser priority. Because China, PRC, relations with PRC was a larger priority. Why? Because PRC had developed differences with another communist state, which is USSR. ठीक है, तो इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये सारी चीजें आई हैं. तो यूएस ने एक तरफ ये डिफरेंस दिखाया कि हाँ, वी एग्री बाय दिस प्रिंसिपल ऑफ टेरिटोरियल इंटीग्रिटी एंड सोवरेनिटी, but then we also have traditional relations with Taiwan. Issues should be resolved peacefully. So there is a lot of ambiguity in diplomacy, because ambiguity is useful. All right, ambiguity is useful. अगर आपने हाँ कह दिया, ना कह दिया, बहुत क्लियर है. लेकिन अगर आपने हाँ नहीं कहा, ना नहीं कहा, तो ये ambiguity है. All right, because it allows you flexibility. Simple, right? So यहाँ पे ये simple idea है कि strategic और deliberate ambiguity है US के approach में. On the one hand, it has continued to have relations with Taiwan, including assuring it security support. On the other hand, it developed relations with PRC also. Right? So in these contexts, this idea comes into picture. What about India? India follows one China policy. Well, that's an overstatement. When China says there is one China, हमको कोई मुश्किल नहीं है उससे, because we say relations should be based on respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, right? Non-interference. So these are our principles. So that's why primarily we don't have a problem if China says there is only one China, right? So we paying deference to that means that we are accepting this idea. But what exactly is China or one China is a matter of interpretation. So if China says that our territory is part of its territory, India would not accept that All right. So that would not mean India respecting one China policy. But generally, as a statement of territorial integrity, of course, that is something with which we don't have a problem, right? And with Taiwan, we have informal relations. We opened cultural centers, commercial centers. Now, because of increasing economic exposure, we have tried to regulate some of our trade relations. So we signed a double taxation avoidance agreement, right? Remember, Taiwan is part of APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, as a separate economy. All right. So ये complicated situation है international relation में. Taiwan is not recognized as a sovereign state by many states, most of the states, including India, and most of the states by that logic are accepting one China policy, right? Now 2010 India stopped the use of one China in the backdrop. So अगर कोई question पूछे Ministry of External Affairs के spokesperson से, so meaning would be drawn whether they are using the term one China or not. So we stopped using the term one China after 2010. Why? Because China started issuing stapled visa to people from Jammu and Kashmir. Right? Generally, visa is stamped on your passport. China issued paper visas, stapled it on the passport. That's why stapled visa. So we said that this is interference. All right. So we have also not been using one China in our statements since then. All right. So this is something that we need to understand. Right. क्वेश्चन कैसा आएगा ये भी हम समझ लेंगे, पर बहुत सारे टर्म्स इसमें यूज हुए हैं. फर्स्ट आइलैंड चेन. ताइवान इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी पार्ट ऑफ फर्स्ट आइलैंड चेन स्ट्रैटेजी. हु स्ट्रैटेजी इज दिस? दिस इज अ कोल्ड वॉर एरा स्ट्रैटेजी ऑफ यूएस. इट वांटेड टू कंटेन रशिया एंड इट वाज अ मैरीटाइम स्ट्रैटेजी दैट strengthen encircling of Russia by establishing presence in the islands, strategic islands around Russia, around Soviet Union. All right. Where? In the Pacific mainly, because Arctic generally was not navigable, right? So strategically Arctic was not as hot as the Pacific was in that period. So this is the strategy of US vis-a-vis USSR. Now this strategy has been revived in writings, academic writings or writings of strategic experts, and now they see this island chain strategy as part of US strategy of containing China. All right. So Taiwan is one of those islands. Japan is one of those islands. All right. South Korea is one of those regions. Then South China Sea island, Southeast Asian countries are part of that island chain. So ये island chain strategy है, right? So this is what you need to keep in mind. Remember, whether India should recognize Taiwan or not is always a question of what is the benefit to us, just for the sake of it, or are we seeking something strategic out of it? So that's why these questions are not answered by people like me. It's beyond my paycheck. It is something that the government has to decide. All right. So till then you understand that one China policy is talked about in the context of China, right? And this is the island chain strategy as we talked about. These are the islands. All right. Second island chain. So if you see the Southeast Asian region, the East Asian region, all right. So these are all considered to be islands which are important in order to control the passageways in the sea, right? It's part of the maritime strategy of US. Taiwan is considered to be part of the first chain. First chain closest to China. All right. In any case, if you draw a line, this is the Soviet Union, this is Russia. So even in that conception, it would be the first island chain. Right, so these are jargons of IR जिसमें बहुत सारे लोगों को बहुत इंटरेस्ट हो जाता है. यूपीएससी में टाइम वेस्ट करने का टाइम नहीं है आपके पास, राइट? तो अपने इंटरेस्ट को थोड़ा कंट्रोल करना भी जरूरी है इफ यू वांट टू कवर थिंग्स. तो ये आप पढ़ लें, अगर आपको कोई दिक्कत हो तो आप मुझे बता दें, मैं इसके बारे में बात कर लूंगा. अब वन कंट्री टू सिस्टम्स, आफ्टर टॉपिक वी विल टेक क्वेश्चंस. वन कंट्री टू सिस्टम्स. अब ये दिस इज अनदर टर्म विच इज यूज इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ चाइना. पहला तो ये आपको पता होना चाहिए दैट दिस इज यूज इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ चाइना. व्हाट इज दिस? सो दिस इज अ set of special arrangements, right, regarding governance in China. All right. One country is a statement of sovereignty and territorial integrity, that China is one country. But some parts of China may be different because of historical reasons, and the main difference is that they are allowed to continue with their own political and economic system. So the two system is the reference to one, mainland China PRC is ruled by a single party, Communist Party of China, all right. But Hong Kong continued to have democracy, democratically elected governments, all right, or institutions. And you see, Macau is known, famous for its gambling industry, all right. So it also developed separately from the economic system of China, and it was allowed to retain this for 50 years. After Portugal returned Macau to China, and after the British returned Hong Kong to China. So ये जो return हुआ, you understand there is a very interesting fact about Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a strategic port, all right, and Britishers as imperial power were interested in controlling these special areas, Shanghai, Hong Kong, etc., right? And Hong Kong was handed over to UK on a 99-year lease by the Chinese then. Chinese were weak, so the Britishers prevailed and Hong Kong was handed over to them for 99-year lease. आजकल आप बात करते हैं हम्मन टोटा 99-year lease. तो चाइना वही कर रहा है जो इसने सीखा है वेस्ट से. All right, if somebody notices that. So ये हुआ, that was the time of colonialism, imperialism, in which some parts of China, especially the coastal region, were controlled by under the influence of various imperial powers. All right, this is part of what is called cutting of the Chinese melon, the various treaties which Chinese remember as unequal treaties or imposed treaties. All right, or Xi Jinping calls this period century of humiliation. And that's why Xi Jinping's idea is that I would never allow this to happen again. And for that, Chinese Communist Party should be strong, right? So some of the explanation of these behaviors lies in history, but not completely. But from history, what we see is what is happening currently. So this is Hong Kong, just off the coast of mainland China, separate economic systems, political systems, right? And this, then Macau, also a special region. So Macau also has a separate economic system. अब उसका जो explanation है आपको इस box में दिया हुआ है, if you see, दिया हुआ है ना? British had taken control of Hong Kong in 1842 after the first Opium War, right? Opium Wars, unequal treaties. 1898, Britain and China signed convention which allowed the British to take control of the islands surrounding Hong Kong on lease for 99 years, right? Macau on the other side had been ruled by Portuguese from 1557. In the 1980s, China initiated talks with both Britain, जैसे इंडिया में गोवा till 1961 was controlled by the Portuguese. हमने बहुत बातचीत करने की कोशिश की उनसे for the return of these territories. When that did not happen, then we moved towards police action. In the 1980s, China initiated talks with both Britain and Portugal for the transfer of two territories. Hong Kong returned to Chinese control in 1997, and Macau sovereignty was transferred in 1999. Along with this were signed agreements or basic understandings within which were contained the guarantees for 50 years. Both these would be allowed to maintain their separate system, because historically they have been such for a very long time. All right, so that's why Hong Kong came in news when in 2020 there was a crackdown by China on pro-democracy activists, and they were saying that what is to happen in 2047, China is trying to do it in 2020. China is contravening its own commitments. All right, so again, this is part of larger Chinese behavior, that's one. But two, you get some historical details, right? So this is where we have completed our discussion on China. Let's see if we can have some revision of it. So what you remember, try to remember, is these agreements which have been signed. Nothing new, it is there in the infographics, right? 1993, Peace and Tranquility Agreement. 1996, Confidence Building Measures Agreement. 2003, Declaration on Principles for Relations and Comprehensive Cooperation between India and China. All right, Protocol to implement confidence building measures was signed in 2005. Agreement on political parameters and guiding principles for settlement of the India-China boundary question, 2005. This is the first step of resolving the boundary question through negotiations under the new mechanism. तो हमने इनिशियल एग्रीमेंट साइन कर लिया है, अभी टॉक्स आर इन द सेकंड स्टेज जहां हमको सेक्टर स्पेसिफिक डिफरेंसेस को डिस्कस करना है. एग्रीमेंट ऑन एस्टैब्लिशमेंट ऑफ वर्किंग मैकेनिज्म फॉर कंसल्टेशन एंड कोऑर्डिनेशन ऑन इंडिया चाइना बॉर्डर अफेयर्स 2012 and BDCA, Border Defense Cooperation Agreement 2013. 13. ये मेजर एग्रीमेंट्स है इंडिया और चाइना के बीच में रिगार्डिंग दिस क्वेश्चन. नाउ यू कैन लुक एट सर्टेन क्वेश्चन. ऑलराइट, there may be some typographical error, but you also understand that this is a question regarding Pangong Tso Lake, right? You may have come across it, right? क्यों चाइना ने पुल बना लिया, चाइना built a bridge over it. This was one of the friction points, North Bank, South Bank, which was resolved after 2020 clashes in 2021. So for various reasons you have heard of Pangong Tso. Ladakh has been in news. Ladakh has been in news also because of the demands of 6th schedule. So then all this means that this geography has been in news. So did you pay attention, apart from the border dispute, to the basics, some features like this? Consider the following about the Pangong Tso Lake. Pangong Tso Lake, situated at a height of almost 4,350 meters, is world's highest saltwater lake. Extending to almost 160 kilometers, 1/3 of Pangong Lake lies in India and the other 2/3 in China. आपको consider करना है correct कौन सा है. For the ease of learning, both of them are correct. All right. For the ease of learning, both of them are correct. Right. It's an endorheic basin. It's an endorheic lake. Right. तो कहीं बाहर की exit नहीं है. इसीलिए it is a saline lake also. Right. So that's basic geography, and we know that one part of it is in China. No matter what conception of boundary we have. So even according to our official conception of boundary, Pangong Tso is divided across India and China. All right. So this is also going back to the basics. Taking interest, अगर interest लेना है तो ऐसी चीजों में interest लो, which increases your technical abilities, not the ability to tell stories. We are human beings. We were born storytellers. All right. क्योंकि सोशल मीडिया में, यूट्यूब में आजकल सब अपनी कहानी सुना रहे हैं, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि कहानी सब सुना लेंगे, कहानी के अंदर कॉन्क्रीट चीजें कम लोगों के पास हैं. राइट. सो it would depend on your interest. The term one country two systems is sometimes mentioned in the news in the context of the affairs of. इस इंफॉर्मेशन का इतना इंपॉर्टेंस है, ऐसा क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी पूछ सकता है. ठीक है. क्योंकि यूपीएससी ने ऐसा ही एक क्वेश्चन पूछा है 2018 में. वो क्या है? द टर्म टू स्टेट सॉल्यूशन इज समटाइम्स मेंशन्ड इन द न्यूज इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ द अफेयर्स ऑफ इजराइल और पैलेस्टाइन. राइट. तो ये पहली चीज तो आपको देखो समझना पड़ेगा कि आपको चाहिए क्या. अब सिमिलरली इफ यू हैव रेड द टेक्स्ट अबाउट इंडिया पाकिस्तान, विच इज द सेकंड टॉपिक, राइट. ब्रेक क्या टाइम हो रहा है? इज इट हाफ वे? ब्रेक सबसे पहले याद आता है सबको. आई एम स्पीकिंग, आई एम टॉकिंग टू यू, आई एम शोइंग द मटेरियल, दिमाग मैं लगा रहा हूं. मेरी चिंता इसलिए, मेरी चिंता मत करो. अगर मेरी चिंता है तो मैं कह रहा हूं मेरी चिंता मत करो, चलते रहो. खैर, इफ इट इज हाफ वे टाइम देन यू प्लीज टेक अ ब्रेक, बट ओनली 5 minutes. ओके. इफ एनीवन हैज अ क्वेश्चन यू कैन आस्क द क्वेश्चन. ब्रेक भी है, क्वेश्चन भी पूछ सकते हो, क्योंकि क्वेश्चन उसका है ना जिसको अपना इंटरेस्ट है. ऑलराइट. वीडियो सबके पास होगा. ठीक है. तो टाइम मैनेज ऐसे करते हैं. टेक अ ब्रेक. इफ यू हैव अ क्वेश्चन यू कैन आस्क दैट ऑल्सो. Okay. Please start returning back to your seats so that we can continue with the discussion of PT 365 coverage of international relations from April 2022 to December 2022. Okay, so just so that people can, keep coming back and can settle down, I'll just tell you what we did. What we did was, first part, we tried to understand the requirement of the examination for at least this subject. But generally, it is applicable to other subjects also. Now, second thing that we did was, we tried to understand areas of questions and types of questions by looking at the questions themselves. Next, what we did was, we tried to develop or establish a link between current affairs cycle, and the kind of questions which UPSC asks, and how should you look at that information. And lastly, what we started doing was, we took up the content. So that also we started looking at through questions, and then important information. What is the important information therein? All right. Now, we can start back by taking up questions. If any one of you has any questions so far, we can start with that. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? अभी वहां पहुंचे नहीं हैं, पहुंचेंगे तो बताएं. So there is a term used called net security provider. It's not a term which has any official meaning. Indian Navy issues a document called India's Maritime Security Strategy, IMSS documents. So in the previous document, term net security provider is explained to basically involve a situation wherein a country which aspires to be a net security provider is aware of the prevailing threats, emerging challenges in the region, and also has the capability to address these challenges. Now, not only address its own security concerns, but also contribute to the security preparedness of other countries in a region. So, in very, very simple terms, you just understand, it's not like we want to be a policeman in that region. We are not taking the responsibility upon ourselves. But we understand, since we are the most capable, thereby, A, there is a responsibility, and there may also be an expectation that India aids in the security preparedness of other countries as well. Right? So that is the idea of net security provider. ठीक है? बाकी जब वहाँ पहुँचेंगे तो हम करेंगे. If there are any other questions, well, as I said, this is the time when you can raise questions. अगर question नहीं है तो हम आगे चलते हैं. Are there questions? Okay. So then I am assuming there are no questions because I asked for questions. So the 1.2, the content, right, going chronologically, serial wise, is about Pakistan. So we are largely in the neighborhood region. You understand that? And now we are talking about Pakistan. Now Pakistan also, for one reason or the other, is perennially in news. And perhaps the highest number of experts on international relations in India are on Pakistan. All right? Every household has an expert on Pakistan. Sometimes all members of a family are experts on Pakistan. Why? What is this a function of? This is a function of the relation itself being in news, most of the times for provocative reasons, and thereby this playing out in the news cycle. And sometimes I would say disproportionately as compared to the value we should give to this. But in any case, if you have read the content from the perspective of UPSC, there are certain terminologies which would have come up. One is the issue of border. Of course, we have a lot of problems with Pakistan. Problems are of territorial nature, right? And problems are of security nature. Prominently history of war, but also continuous terrorism supported by Pakistan. So this is our national interest. How do we change this behavior of Pakistan? So that's why understanding Pakistan is important. All right, as somebody said, that keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Right? So that's why awareness is where it all starts. But होता क्या है? इस तरह के विषयों में सभी एक्सपर्ट बन जाते हैं. राइट? कि पाकिस्तान के साथ क्या करना चाहिए. अभी मैं एक वीडियो का टाइटल देख रहा था. अब ये वीडियो मैं देखता नहीं हूं क्योंकि मुझे पता है ये मेरे वेस्ट ऑफ टाइम है, पर वो यूट्यूब के फीड में हमेशा आता रहता है ना. तो मैं उसके टाइटल देख के आनंद लेता हूं. इट इज क्लिकबेट कि मास्टर स्ट्रोक, पाकिस्तान को जो है, पाकिस्तान अब तो एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करेगा. ऑल राइट? हाँ, जिसके भी चैनल हो उनको ध्यान देना चाहिए कि फॉरेन रिलेशन के बारे में बात करते समय रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, जिम्मेदारी का काम है ये, आनंद और इंटरटेनमेंट का काम नहीं है ये. ऑल राइट? दीज आर सम ऑफ द सीरियस इश्यूज फेस. तो इंटरटेनमेंट की तरह इसको प्रेजेंट ना करें क्योंकि आप बहुत सारे लोगों का नुकसान करेंगे क्योंकि उनकी एक्सपेक्टेशन यही बन जाएगी. ऑल राइट? तो चीजों को जितनी सीरियसनेस से लेना चाहिए उतना लेना चाहिए. और इससे एक समझ और आती है. द सेकेंड लर्निंग दैट वी डिराइव इज लेट the things which have to be handled by the experts to them. All right, let the professionals do their job. What you do, you prepare yourself to become future professionals. All right, पर अभी student रहो. तो ये terms आपने सुने होंगे. Border dispute है, territorial disputes है. So the conception of borders, right? Red cliff line, line of control, actual ground position line, or red line, green line. These are various conceptions of lines denoting border regions between India and Pakistan. Second, you may have come across an initiative called Kartarpur Corridor. It is one of the important initiatives to have come up in such times in these relations where the communication was bare minimum. All right, and the issue was provocation on the part of Pakistan by promoting terrorism in India and India's response to it. Right. So in that context, this came into news. So this is also current affairs. Kartarpur corridor was inaugurated in 2019 to promote visa-free travel for pilgrims. All right, one-day travel, you apply for permit, but you don't require visa. A fee of around $20 is levied, but it was a good initiative in terms of allowing the pilgrims to complete their religious formalities or ceremonies. And if these kinds of measures continue, we may think that we may create a situation where there is awareness among the two people, there is cooperation among two countries, and thereby complex issues can be resolved. But it never happens in India-Pakistan relations. It's the case of coming back to square one. All right? So we make progress, but then the relations suffer from setback. All right? Now, ये टर्म आपके दिमाग में आए, आपको दिखना ही होगा, दिखा ही होगा. तो ये जो है करतारपुर कॉरिडोर है. करतारपुर कॉरिडोर कनेक्ट्स डेरा बाबा नानक विथ करतारपुर साहिब, राइट? गुरुद्वारा करतारपुर साहिब इन पाकिस्तान, राइट? This is the Gurdaspur district in India. If you see, you make a general conception. UPSC asks these kinds of questions. So it is southwest of Pathankot. All right. It is, if we see generally, west of Gurdaspur, and it is north of Amritsar. Right. One thing, awareness. When you cross this corridor, so this is a special infrastructure which has been built from border to border, right, and beyond. You cross a particular geographical feature. What is this geographical feature? The river, because the next topic is also Indus Water Treaty, right? What kind of questions can you answer by this simple information? These kinds of questions you can easily answer. What is this question? Which of the following rivers is crossed while traveling through the Kartarpur corridor between India and Pakistan? Simple awareness based question, nothing too complicated. It's also about a fundamental, which is what? Fundamentals of geographical systems close by. So Ravi is the correct answer here, right? So this is something that should come to your mind when you are preparing. UPSC asked a question in 2020, right? India-Pakistan relations were in also news, territorial aspects of it, border aspects of it, India-China relations were also in news. So no matter how complicated you would like to make it, UPSC knows what you are capable of, right? Or what can be expected from you. So as I said, it would not bring you into unnecessary complications because those issues are to be handled by professionals and have to be handled sensitively. All right. So what kind of question it asks? Siachen Glacier is located to the east of Aksai Chin? No. East of Leh? You don't know. I don't know. North of Gilgit? Certainly not. All right. North of Nubra Valley? I don't know. All right. But simply, location of Leh is visible on any map. Gilgit, Baltistan is visible on any map. Aksai Chain is marked on any map. All right. Perhaps Nubra Valley sometimes is not marked in many maps. But this question itself, on the basis of general awareness, enables you to reach to this conclusion D. Whether you know things directly or you do know things indirectly. UPSC is not asking कि कैसे आंसर तक पहुंचे. आंसर तक पहुंचो. Right. Reach to the answer. That is what UPSC is asking you to do. So why, where simple awareness would do, you spend efforts as you want to be experts. ऐसा करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Right? Save yourself some labor. Right? ये यहाँ से पता चलता है. Similarly, can you answer this question if you have read the content? Can you answer this question? Consider the following about Indus Water Treaty. Questions pertaining to the treaty are handled by the Permanent Indus Commission. 2. Differences are handled by the appointment of a neutral expert. 3. For resolution of a dispute, there is a provision for the appointment of a 7-member arbitral tribunal. Which of these statements are correct? 1 only, 2 only, 1 and 3 only, all. All right. So again, for the purpose of learning, I have set the option for all to be correct, but UPSC would mix match these, right? So you have the information here, which was there in the printed material also, which is something that you should know about the Indus Water Treaty. But what do you know about Indus Water Treaty? Blood and water cannot flow together, cannot flow hand in hand. मतलब पहले डॉक्यूमेंट का पहला 10-20 पेज पढ़ने की बजाय आप सीधे आखिरी पेज पे पहुंच जाते हैं, है ना? ये प्रैक्टिकल लोगों की प्रॉब्लम होती है, जिनको लगता है केवल काम की चीज बताओ ना, क्यों इधर उधर की बातें आप बता रहे हैं. ऑलराइट, तो जो आपको इधर उधर की बातें लगती हैं, दैट इज कॉल्ड प्रोसेस. And in this examination, process is more important. All right, so what should we know about the Indus Water Treaty? Yes, yes. आते हैं, उस पर भी आते हैं. I will answer your question through the content. But I'm simply saying that this is the mindset that you should make. All right? When there is something provocative or controversial, you don't run after the controversy, you go to the basics. Answering questions would become easier because अभी पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट चल रहे हैं, सबसे ज़्यादा डर लोगों को लगता है कंट्रोवर्शियल क्वेश्चन से. कंट्रोवर्सी में नहीं जाना चाहते. कंट्रोवर्सी में इसलिए नहीं जाना चाहते कि आपने बेसिक्स नहीं किया है. ऑल राइट, तो बेसिक्स कर लिया होता तो कंट्रोवर्सी का भी आंसर आप कर देते. ठीक है, चलिए, तो ये सारे के सारे सही हैं एंड इट इज वन ऑफ द टेक्निकल डिटेल्स ऑफ द इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी. सो वी शुड गिव रिस्पेक्ट टू द कंटेंट to the extent it deserves it. Indus Water Treaty deserves importance. I myself personally give a lot of time to explaining Indus Water Treaty because it has a lot of applications. First, questions in mains have been asked. Second, question in preliminary examination have been asked. Third, it is one of the very few better functioning mechanisms between India and Pakistan, which is perennially in news. Every year it is in news. All right? And for me, it is a wonderful treaty. It's an example of a wonderful treaty. People may have difference of opinion, but when you have difference of opinion on what matter? Simply because I'm saying it's a wonderful treaty or something else. So for there goes the detail of the treaty, right? So let me, simply take you to the content, and I will tell you the story which you need to know because the content is here. So some basic information is there. Become aware of Pakistan. India-Pakistan border runs along Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan and Gujarat, these states. So one of the simplest things would be just look at the bordering states between India and any of the neighboring countries. Just look at the states which have a coast. All right, 9 states in India are coastal states. 4 union territories are maritime territories of India. पता है इतना आपको? ये तो basic fundamental है. ऑल राइट, बहुत सारे लोगों को नहीं पता होता. नहीं पता होने में भी कोई शर्म की बात नहीं. एक तो सबसे बड़ी बीमारी इस एग्जाम में होगी शर्म, कि आप अपना इग्नोरेंस नहीं एक्सेप्ट करेंगे. किस लिए? क्योंकि एक तरह का वो बन गया है, रेजिस्टेंस हो गया है कि योर वर्थ लाइज ओनली इन आंसरिंग ऑल द क्वेश्चंस करेक्टली. जैसे घरों में लोग आपसे बोलते होंगे यूपीएससी की तैयारी कर रहे हो, इतना भी नहीं पता, तो उन बातों को सीरियसली नहीं लेना होता, क्योंकि यूपीएससी एक्चुअली ये नहीं चाहता कि आपको सब पता हो. ऑल राइट, सब पता हो तो आपको शेप क्या करेंगे? UPSC is only an examination which is recommending you your suitability to DOPT. बाकी का काम सरकार आगे देख लेगी. All right, so register your capability to that extent only, right? So 2,300 kilometers of border excluding Kashmir border. All right, because Kashmir has a certain complicated history to it in the sense of one part of Jammu and Kashmir being territorially occupied by Pakistan. Right? So our formal conception of border would be the official map that we consider for that region. But practically speaking, territory is not controlled by us. And in between are armed forces of 2 countries, right? And they are along certain regions guarding the line which is not international border. It's a instrument which has derived out of agreements between India and Pakistan, and it has a history of conflict, right? Line of control. So Jammu and Kashmir, larger part, बारिंग जम्मू में का कुछ हिस्सा हम कंसिडर करते हैं इंटरनेशनल बॉर्डर. पाकिस्तान उसको भी डिस्प्यूट करता है, बट वो हिस्सा क्योंकि कंप्लीटली जितना टेरिटरी हमको चाहिए हमारे हिस्से में, फॉर अस दैट इज इंटरनेशनल बॉर्डर. बट लार्ज पार्ट ऑफ इट इज कवर्ड बाय LOC, लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल, एंड लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल गोज ओनली टिल अ पॉइंट कॉल्ड NJ9842. उसके बाद देयर इज एम्बिग्विटी इन डॉक्यूमेंट्स एंड देयर वाज नो डिमार्केशन. ऑल राइट, सो दैट्स वेयर यू वुड सी the next line beyond LAC is AGPL, actual ground position line. All right, through which that is the position of India on the Saltoro Ridge. All right, here, near about here, right? Here is the area that India controls. Saltoro Ridge is the mountain ridge where India maintains its position, and that position, if demarcated on the map, we provisionally refer to it as actual ground position line. All right, so that's something that we know. Any map that you see, you will know about it. You will know about the states and union territory sharing borders with Pakistan. Not a difficult task. Now some information about Pakistan. Pakistan traditionally comprises of 4 provinces. All right, Here in this region is what is called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. All right, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the northwest parts of Pakistan. So that's why when the Britishers were here, the part which is Arunachal Pradesh today, the name was North East Frontier Agency. इसी तरह से ब्रिटिशर्स के टाइम पे ये था नॉर्थ वेस्ट फ्रंटियर प्रोविंस. Then some areas Britishers included in what is today Pakistan and then was British India from Afghanistan after the Durand Line came into existence 1893, right? So some of these areas are dominated by Pashtuns, and it's an interesting information. In Pakistan the largest ethnic group is Pashtun. So one solution that I think may happen is that in the future Pakistan becomes Afghanistan. All right, that side of Pakistan is Afghanistan, which is what Afghanistan claims, that border should be at Attock, which is banks of Indus, and this side of Indus is India. All right, we restore the natural barriers, natural markers. We have a friendly country in Afghanistan there. Maybe something like this may happen, but I would not propose it as a theory or reality on some YouTube channel because this is loose talk. All right, चलिए आगे चलते हैं. So Northwest Frontier Province, federally administered tribal areas, FATA as Britishers used to call it, right? They have been merged into KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This part is Punjab, right? Punjab, part of Punjab in India, part of Punjab in Pakistan. The most important province of Pakistan, demographically, economically, agriculture-wise, benefits from the Indus system. Punjab is a leading province. Political leadership, current Prime Minister of Punjab, Pakistan is from Punjab. All right, and also military leadership prominently comes from Punjab. Right? You move southwards. This is the province sharing borders with India is Sindh, where you have the port of Karachi. Right? So Sindh is another prominent province because of its energy resources and prominent political family of Benazir Bhutto being associated with this. The Sharifs from Punjab, Bhuttos from Sindh. All right. So this is Sindh, and then this province, which has a coast in the Indian Ocean region, borders Iran, borders Afghanistan. This is Balochistan. All right. Geographically, the largest province of Pakistan, but very sparsely populated, rich in hydrocarbon reserves, very strategically located in terms of its port potential. Gwadar is located in Balochistan. All right. So this is something that you should know about Pakistan. Right. To start with, India-Pakistan boundary is result of partition in 1947 under the Redcliffe Award. Right. The Redcliffe Committee or the Partition Committee was appointed. It proposed the idea of the territorial composition of India and Pakistan. One principle were prominent, that was demographic principle, right? So that is the limitation of this boundary. It does not take into consideration the geographic realities. For example, in United India, the Indus system was within one country. When partition takes place, it so happens that the irrigation system that in the Indus region that the Britishers built and then extended agriculture in Pakistan, Punjab, the head of the canal systems lay in India and the mouth, the end, the terminal lay in Pakistan. All right. So what should happen to these kinds of things? Well, this was not the priority of the Britishers when they were thinking about partition. All right. So partition was a flawed process. The roots of India-Pakistan issues lie in the nature of partition, and then the nature of state that Pakistan became. All right, that is something simply which explains the problems. Right, so Redcliffe line became the conception of international boundary first. Right, so Redcliffe line defining boundaries between India, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. ठीक? Now, a dispute arises where Pakistan invades India, meaning invades Jammu and Kashmir. By then, Jammu and Kashmir had decided to be independent, not join India or Pakistan. When Jammu and Kashmir asked for India's help, India said that by signing of instrument of accession, what would happen is India would be defending its own territory. Without signing that, it would mean India is sending troops to a foreign land. So Jammu and Kashmir joined India, we sent troops, but the war stopped at a juncture where territorially some part of Jammu and Kashmir, including prominently Gilgit-Baltistan, and what we call POK and Pakistan calls Azad Kashmir, Muzaffarabad being the center of it, went to Pakistan, right? So this war's end in a way came through the UN mediation, right? Now UN proposed a ceasefire line, so part of the boundary became known as ceasefire line, all right, because it was part of the agreement on ceasefire, 1949 ceasefire line. Now there are subsequent wars between India and Pakistan, very less adjustment to the border, 1965, some exchanges, but by and large the situation remains the same. 1971, a decisive military victory for India. So on the one hand, now we have a separate border with Bangladesh, all right, based on Red Cliff Line, but now based on the land boundary agreement between India and Bangladesh, finally implemented in 2015, initially signed in 1974, right? So now if you see 1971, the war was on this front also, right, the western front also. So here again what is happening is, after the war we enter into a process of negotiation, right? So that process of negotiation leads to an agreement called Simla Agreement. Simla Agreement is where India decisively makes this issue bilateral and strengthens its position, which is that there is no role for any third party in issues between India and Pakistan, all right? And one of the outcomes of Simla Agreement was the bilateral understanding on line of control. So line of control replaces ceasefire line, which was a UN mediated line. Now line of control is a bilateral instrument, all right, agreed upon in an agreement between India and Pakistan. Okay. Now Simla Agreement also expected that now after India decisively won, future would be about talks. So Simla Agreement emphasizes bilateralism, emphasizes the need for peaceful negotiations between India and Pakistan to resolve their issues. But the expectation did not get fulfilled. Pakistan itself changed. Mr. Bhutto, who had signed this agreement, is hanged by the incoming military ruler, Ziaul Haq, all right? And under Ziaul Haq, Pakistan adopts a more radical path, right? So thereby the expectation that India always had, that let's have peace, हो गया झगड़ा, खत्म करते हैं, आगे बढ़ते हैं, right? That has never been met on part of Pakistan. On the contrary, Pakistan, once defeated in traditional wars, has adopted what is called sub-conventional warfare strategy. A part of it is promoting terrorism against India, right? Which has deniability, it is a low-cost option, but in some extent that Pakistan keeps on harming our interests. That is our pet peeve with Pakistan. Let's look at thereby other aspects of relations have remained underdeveloped. Till 2019, India-Pakistan trade hovered around $2 billion with a trade surplus in favor of India. After 2019, in the aftermath of Pathankot attacks, India increased, even before that, 2016, India had increased import duties, custom duties from on imports from Pakistan, all right, as a punitive measure. But since trade volumes were not large, this step was not expected to yield significant results. 2019, what happened? Pathankot, 2019, Pulwama happened. So after Pulwama, what we did was we revoked the MFN status, most favored nation status, which generally is an obligation under WTO. Every country is a most favored nation. You just formally declare that, okay, we will also grant you most favored nation status. It doesn't mean much. But Pakistan even could not do that. So Pakistan had not accorded India a most favored nation status. India had done so in 1996. India revoked it in 2019. These are trade related economic measures. 2019, 5th of August, what happened? The changes were made in the administrative structure of Jammu and Kashmir, and within Article 370, which was opposed by Pakistan. So now Pakistan did what? It suspended all trade with India. All right. So you will see, because of various reasons, other aspects of relations have not evolved that much. So that's why trade currently is around 500 million, a very minuscule, small number. Cross LOC travel was started in 2005. Trade across J&K was initiated in 2009. So then here, let's have a story. India and Pakistan have had many negotiations. One of them was Indus Water Treaty negotiation. After that, Simla Agreement. After that, the Lahore visit of Prime Minister Vajpayee. So Lahore Declaration was issued. And then in around 2003, India and Pakistan start the most comprehensive of all dialogues that they have had. It was called the Composite Dialogue Process. It was comprehensive because it covered dialogues across various ministries at various levels, ministerial level, at the secretarial level, at the expert level. B, it covered a range of issues. Issues pertaining to terrorism, issues pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir, Indus Water Treaty related issues, trade related issues. So within that, what you would see is we inched towards certain confidence building measures. And one of the issues pertaining to Jammu and Kashmir which was discussed was humanitarian aspects of it. That families live on both sides of the LOC. So how should we ease the lives of these families? How should we allow them to interact with each other more? How should two parts of Kashmir be allowed to interact more? So thereby border crossing points at LOC were identified and travel between LOC was made possible. This travel continues till date. Alright, border crossing points exist. Right. Now rest of the agreements are of not much value, but let's go to the Indus Water Treaty. यहाँ पे technicality है थोड़ा सा. So basic facts, right? What are the basic facts? Indus Water Treaty was signed in 1960 between India and Pakistan. India represented by Prime Minister Nehru, Pakistan represented by their military ruler General Ayub Khan, right? Now what is this treaty about? As the title of the treaty says, it is about the most satisfactory and complete utilization of the waters of Indus Basin. Meaning it's about managing the waters of Indus Basin, which is a cross boundary basin, trans-boundary basin, right? So water issues are very complicated. Indus is the lifeline of Pakistan. If you look at Pakistan, there is no Pakistan without Indus, alright, Indus Basin. Pakistan is a lower riparian, India is an upper riparian, meaning India is first as the water flows downwards towards Pakistan. Now lower riparian is very sensitive about what upper riparian does on these rivers, like India is about what China is doing on Brahmaputra, because we are a lower riparian. India realized that this would be one of the issues because this was not resolved through partition. 1948, what happened was that an agreement had basically lapsed. So then in Pakistan, the discussion started that India would choke them dry, right? India is going to prevent them from accessing water. India wanted peace. And for that, the best way is to have an agreement. An agreement is nothing but legal obligations taken upon by the signatories. So this agreement was negotiated. It basically creates a framework of legal obligations, rights and obligations. Who can do what and who cannot do, who can't do, or who can do what not, right? So then how does the treaty ensure the most complete and satisfactory utilization of waters of the Indus Basin? It does so by simply dividing the basin into two categories of rivers. One is the western rivers, another is the eastern rivers, right? So now notice here your understanding starts. These are the eastern rivers. Now if you see, they are most important rivers for Indian states like Himachal Pradesh or Punjab, alright? So then eastern rivers are allocated under the treaty for the unrestricted usage of India. Meaning treaty does not put many restrictions on India's usage of the water of these rivers. Now western rivers, these are the western rivers, Chenab, Jhelum and Indus. Alright, north to south, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab. Alright, Ravi, Bias, Satluj. Right, so UPSC may ask a question north to south. Right, arrange the rivers north to south. So western rivers are allocated by the treaty for the unrestricted usage of Pakistan. Okay? Meaning treaty puts least amount of restriction on Pakistan's rights, right? So this gives the idea, some people write that 80-20 division is there. Treaty does not say 80-20. In effect, it's basically the calculation of what is the discharge of these two basins. Okay? So this is one. Second, about rights on western rivers for India. So on western rivers, India has what are called non-consumptive rights. Alright, or rights of non-consumptive usage. In very simple terms, it means that no such use which can drastically reduce the availability of water downstream. Alright, so you can have use for drinking water, urban sanitation purposes, gardening, small scale agriculture and irrigation within the provisions of the treaty, right? So urban sewage removal, etc. Navigation. So that's non-consumptive use rights that India has on the western rivers, which are allocated for unrestricted use to Pakistan by the treaty. The second question, interesting question that comes up in the context of the various projects, because that these keep on coming in news, Kishan Ganga, etc. So then what is it that India can do on the western rivers? Can it build hydropower plants? So India can build hydropower plants, but they have to be within the specifications of the treaty. All right, the designs should conform the specifications of the treaty. Right, so thereby India cannot build large storage structures. India can build storage structures. Of course, use of water would require storage structures, but India cannot build large storage structures. Large storage structures like the dams that we have, right, Sardar Sarovar, etc., Bhakra Nangal, etc. Right, they build a large structure to hold water, and that creates a basically reservoir. Right, so we cannot do that. So our projects mainly are run of the river projects, which basically do not create large storage structure, but use the slope gradient flow of the river to generate electricity by running the turbine. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया. अब इसके अलावा ट्रीटी में और क्या है? Now the treaty also provides for a structures to help in the implementation, address the questions, address the differences, and address the disputes. Right. So the structure created by Indus Water Treaty is Permanent Indus Commission, PIC, which is supposed to meet at least once every year, but it has met more than once every year. So Permanent Indus Commission has had 118 meetings so far. All right. This year also the meeting is due. Now we see that the role of Permanent Indus Commission is bureaucratic, right? Two Indus commissioners are appointed, one by India, one by Pakistan. Now they continuously interact with each other on the implementation of the treaty. So the PIC facilitates exchange of information, and in that sense helps in the implementation of the treaty. And PIC also is the forum where questions pertaining to the implementation of treaty raised by the respective governments can be discussed. All right. So suppose India is implementing a river project, Pakistan says it violates the Indus Water Treaty, all right, because it does not conform to the design of the Indus Water Treaty. What to do? So first it would be a question. What kind of design are you making? You raise it at PIC. Now when questions remain unresolved, they go beyond the purview of PIC. So now they are deemed to be differences, all right. Now for differences, Indus Water Treaty provides for appointment of a neutral expert. Hydrological legal experts are appointed. India, Pakistan would submit their positions to that expert. Expert would give the opinion, and that should resolve the difference. But even when a difference remains unresolved by the mechanism of a neutral expert, what happens? It is deemed to be a dispute. And for the dispute resolution, the Indus Water Treaty provides for appointment of a 7-member arbitral panel. And now remember, the role of World Bank initially was that of a mediator. Why? India and Pakistan did not enjoy great trust with each other. World Bank did not have much of a reputation. It was a new institution involved in development financing, including financing of some of the projects which were envisaged under the Indus Water Treaty, like the Satluj Valley project spreading across India and Pakistan. So that's the role that World Bank played as a neutral mediator. For the first 10 years, its role was in overseeing the implementation. After that, it does not have a substantive role. But the only role that World Bank has right now in the context of Indus Water Treaty is that when a neutral expert has to be appointed, both sides need to approach the World Bank. World Bank helps in the appointment of neutral expert. Why? Again, India appointed expert would not be acceptable to Pakistan. Pakistan appointed expert would not be acceptable to India. And similarly, when the 7-member arbitration panel has to be established, there also the initiation is done by, the help is given by World Bank. Alright, so World Bank facilitates the request for appointment of a neutral expert or appointment of an arbitration panel and its members. ठीक है, तो ये होता रहता है हमेशा. किशन गंगा के केस में हुआ, बहुत सारे केसेस में हुआ. पिछले बार जब परमानेंट इंडस कमीशन की मीटिंग हुई तो पाकिस्तान रेज्ड कंसर्न्स अबाउट सम अदर rivers and projects on them, all right, which have been named there. And then India raised the issue of the Fazilka drain. Pakistan had blocked the Fazilka drain, right? जो भी पंजाब से उनको फाजिलका ड्रेन के बारे में पता होगा, right? So that basically, carries a lot of urban influence into the Satluj. तो अब वो रोक देने की वजह से क्या हुआ कि वहां पे वो पानी स्टैग्नेट होने लगा. एंड इट्स इन्वायरमेंटली डिट्रीमेंटल। तो वो हमने अपना कंसर्न उठाया कि भाई अनहिंडर्ड फ्लो होना चाहिए इन रिवर्स का, मैनेजमेंट ऑफ ड्रेन्स बेसिन्स वो दोनों की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, प्रिवेंटिंग अनड्यू पॉल्यूशन ऑफ द इंडस बेसिन इज ऑल्सो द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द कंट्रीज अंडर द ट्रीटी। ठीक है, तो इस तरह की बातें पीआईसी पे होती रहती। पीआईसी के बियॉन्ड इंडिया और पाकिस्तान ने आर्बिट्रेशन भी किया है, इंडिया और पाकिस्तान ने परमानेंट एक्सपर्ट की मदद भी ली है, राइट। And after 2016, what happened was Pakistan was demanding appointment of an arbitration panel. India was saying no neutral expert on the issue of Kishan Ganga. तो वर्ल्ड बैंक ने कहा कि माफ करो, पहले आपस में तय कर लो कि क्या चाहिए. सो इट सस्पेंडेड द प्रोसेस ऑफ अपॉइंटमेंट ऑफ अ न्यूट्रल एक्सपर्ट और अ आर्बिट्रेशन पैनल, जो कि अब धीरे से शुरू हुआ है. तो ऐसा होता है इस ट्रीटी के अंदर, ये बातें हैं, टेक्निकलिटीज ये हैं और ये आपको देखने में आ रहा है. अब आप टेक्स्ट पढ़ेंगे, अगर आपको कोई प्रॉब्लम नजर आएगी आप मुझे बता दीजिएगा. एक इंटरेस्टिंग चीज है जो अक्सर मैं क्लास में पढ़ाता हूँ इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, कि भाई इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी को लेके बहुत सारे लोग नाराज हैं, राइट. देयर आर लॉट ऑफ क्रिटिसिज्म ऑफ इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी. मच ऑफ द क्रिटिसिज्म इज मिसप्लेस्ड, मिसइन्फॉर्म्ड, एंड इट कम्स इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ द violent events like wars or like terrorism continuing from Pakistan, कि क्यों हम इस ट्रीटी को कंटिन्यू करें. So first of all, the treaty itself does not have a withdrawal clause. So legally you have to make a tenable case. That case can only be made indirectly by saying that, you know, under the understanding of international law or the judgments of ICJ, we can make a case that once the surrounding circumstances in which the treaty was signed do not exist or does not exist, treaty can be revoked. All right, indirect case बना सकते हो क्योंकि treaty के अंदर कोई exit clause नहीं है, right? Secondly, withdrawing from a treaty is not a responsible act, right? Thirdly, some people may bring in humanitarian angle that ultimately access to water may be a human rights issue. It's a humanitarian issue. Why do you do that? So then the solutions have to be provided within that understanding, that unless government of India says let's revoke the treaty, you are no one to say revoke the treaty. All right. So when government of India does that, what will we do? We will say how is it justified. All right. Today we will say why it is not beneficial, right? Because ultimately it would not lead to much. So then what do we do? So the solutions are very simple. Those of you who have been with me in the class, the solutions are very simple. We say that A, put in place all necessary efforts to expedite implementation of projects on the western rivers. All right, complete them. Second, on the eastern rivers, put in place all measures to ensure the optimal utilization of India's share, using the last drop of water of India's share. Why should we allow any water, extra water to go to Pakistan? So that's where you will see the Uj Dam, the Shahpur Kandi project, the Ravi Bias link project. These are projects on eastern rivers announced after 2016 to ensure complete utilization of eastern waters, right? Then if you want to revoke the treaty, it's not about revocation of the treaty. Can we change the treaty? So I always used to mention in the class, Article 12, Clause 3 of the treaty says that the treaty can be modified from time to time if both the sides agree. So use that clause to raise the demand that we want changes in the treaty. Last year, the Parliament Standing Committee issued a report in which said that the Government of India should urge for a renegotiation. Why? Because the treaty was signed in an era when climate change was not a reality. Now climate change is bringing changes to the basin, water availability. So now in that context, Indus Water Treaty can be changed, and this is a reasonable basis of demanding a change, right? And this is precisely what India did this year. All right, it has now raised the demand for modification in the treaty. So once you understand the basics, you already know what kind of actions can be taken, what kind of actions can't be taken. After all, IR cannot be a fantasy movie. All right, RRR won. It's a good thing. Other movies also won, but movies have a particular purpose. All right, and the conduct of business of governments is a slightly serious business. Right? I'm not saying cinema is not a serious business. It is for those who are involved there, all right, or those whose money is involved there, right? But हर चीज सिनेमा नहीं हो सकती, हर चीज एंटरटेनमेंट नहीं हो सकता. ठीक है, तो इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी के बारे में आपको ये समझने की जरूरत है. लेट्स सी some questions. One question we have already seen. Another question is So now you already have this information. There the info in the infographics also. 2020 UPSC had asked this question. India-Pakistan relations were in news for the first time. Not for the first time, but certainly after many years, Permanent Indus Commission's meeting were not taking place after 2019. The relations were very tense. So in that context, UPSC asked this question. With reference to the Indus river system, of the following 4 rivers, 3 of them pour into one of them which joins the Indus direct. Among the following, which one is such river that joins the Indus direct? Right? The answer of course is D, Satluj. But there was a debate between Satluj and Chenab whether Satluj empties into Chenab or Chenab empties into Satluj. UPSC ने आंसर दे दिया और डिबेट समाप्त हो गया यहीं पे, right? But some of the questions of UPSC chat इसीलिए कई बार उनके ऑब्जेक्टिव आंसर होते नहीं, तो यूपीएससी कैसे लिख देता है बेस्ट पॉसिबल ऑप्शन हैज टू बी एक्सरसाइज, नॉट द करेक्ट मोस्ट करेक्ट वन. आपको लगता है 2 करेक्ट है तब भी एक्सरसाइज क्या करो, बेस्ट पॉसिबल ऑप्शन. कभी पढ़ा है डायरेक्टिव्स ऑन योर पेपर, तो ये भी एग्जाम स्किल्स में आता है कि आपको पता है एग्जाम क्या पूछ रहा है, राइट? और फिर दुनिया का सबसे मुश्किल, ऑलराइट, ऐसी कोई रैंकिंग नहीं है दुनिया का सबसे मुश्किल एग्जाम कौन सा है. अगर होती तो हमें पता होता, ठीक है. सो इफ यू सी वेरियस सोर्सेज वुड से व्हाट आफ्टर रिसीविंग द झेलम नियर त्रिमू द चेनाब empties into Satluj river, a tributary of Indus river. Its total length is 605 miles and it feeds several irrigation canals. All right, what about Satluj? Continuing southwestward in broad channel, it receives Bias river and forms 65-mile of the India-Pakistan border. So Satluj also forms the border of India and Pakistan. That's where the issue of Fazilka drain, right? Somewhere in the border, the river goes into Pakistan and then slightly comes into India and then flows into Pakistan. All right. So this is basically the information. And entering Pakistan and flowing another 220 miles to join the Chenab river west of Bahawalpur. The combined rivers then form Panjanad, the link between the 5 rivers and the Indus. तो मतलब पंजनद के बारे में तो लोगों को पता था, बिकॉज द कंबाइंड स्ट्रीम विच देन मीट्स द इंडस, जब सारी रिवर्स आपस में मिल चुकी हैं, आखिर में मिलती हैं चेनाब और सतलज. सो आफ्टर दैट द स्ट्रीम फ्लोज एज पंजनद. यूपीएससी डिड नॉट आस्क पंजनद, बट इट सेड कि इनमें से कौन सा. सो सतलज इज द आंसर. तो यूपीएससी क्या सोचता है क्या नहीं सोचता, ये भी गेस नहीं कर सकते. सो व्हाट यू कैन डू इज ईमानदारी से, टू द बेस्ट ऑफ योर एबिलिटी, just try to learn the correct information and don't spend too much time on finding the exact correct information. Origins of rivers, how they are named, is not based on very objective standards. All right, you may find exceptions also. Volume of river, length of river is considered, but sometimes that is not the case, right? तो जितना जान सकते हो रिवर्स के बारे में, क्लास 11 की एनसीईआरटी है, इंडिया ज्योग्राफी, उसके अंदर एक चैप्टर है ड्रेनेज system, in which you already understand that it is the westernmost basin, river basin or drainage system in India. ठीक है, और उसके बाद चीजें पढ़ सकते हैं. तो इसलिए एनसीईआरटी पढ़ने को कहते हैं कि बेस्ट पॉसिबल इंफॉर्मेशन है, इतना कम से कम जान लो, इसके बाद एक्स्ट्रा इंफॉर्मेशन तो और जगहों पे भी होगी, राइट? सो डूएबिलिटी के हिसाब से, फ्रॉम द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ डूएबिलिटी वी सजेस्ट दैट रीड एनसीईआरटी, बिकॉज दैट इज कॉन्क्रीट डूएबल. Otherwise your Google searches or various documents which keep on coming, that's something that is not under your control. NCERT तो है ना, एक NCERT खरीद ली, definitely. Basically why the suggestion read NCERT is given. It's a doable task, right? Now this is about the next topic, India Bangladesh, right? पढ़िए क्वेश्चन. इंडिया पाकिस्तान कर लिया हमने जो मेंशन था, है ना, कंटेंट में जाके दोबारा भी पढ़ लेना एक बार. इट वुड नॉट टेक अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम व्हेन यू कम टू द नेक्स्ट क्लास. आज हो सकता है आपको ये कंटेंट थोड़ा लेट से मिला हो, राइट? बट आप कंटेंट है फॉर द नेक्स्ट क्लास इन ऑर्डर टू ब्रिंग इट अप टू स्पीड. अगर आप पढ़ के आएंगे तो यू हैव डाउट्स एंड क्वेश्चंस, सो सम टॉपिक्स कैन बी एड्रेस थ्रू दैट, सम टॉपिक्स वी विल कवर पेज बाय पेज, सम टॉपिक्स विल नॉट रिक्वायर दैट मच ऑफ अटेंशन. तो कल से पढ़ के आइए आप. कैन यू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन, राइट? ये है विच अमंग द अबव इज आर नॉट पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया बांग्लादेश कोऑपरेशन. सो नॉट लिखा हुआ है वहां पे. एक एक्सपेक्टेशन बन जाती है कि अभी तक आया है विच इज अ पार्ट ऑफ, विच इज करेक्ट. यूपीएससी अचानक से पूछेगा नॉट करेक्ट, यू एंड अप मिसिंग दैट नॉट पार्ट एंड देन यू मार्क द क्वेश्चन रॉन्ग. सो मिस्टेक्स आर मेड एट दिस लेवल ऑल्सो. इसी को कहते हैं ह्यूमन एरर. दिस इज वॉट इज कॉल्ड ह्यूमन एरर. राइट. सो रीड द क्वेश्चन विथ पेशेंस even when you think that you know the answer, right? Remember, it's not the game of fastest finger first, right? ऐसा कुछ नहीं है ना. You have all the time, so why not read the options and read the question completely? I am sure that a lot of people don't have developed this skill also, right? They are in a hurry, an artificial hurry. जबकि हो सकता है पेपर 2 में, एप्टीट्यूड टेस्ट में, you may require very good time management. Some of you find it as cakewalk depending on your background, but GS1 there is no question of hurry. कोई बड़ा मेडल नहीं मिलने वाला आपको कि पहले आपने पेपर कर दिया. So read your options correctly. Of course, for the purpose of learning here, none of these are not a part of India Bangladesh, meaning all of these are examples of India Bangladesh projects, right? Friendship pipeline being constructed between Siliguri and Parbatipur. Maitri Bridge is on the Feni River, which is in Tripura, and then crosses into Bangladesh. Agartala Akhora link, again a rail link between India and Bangladesh, between Bangladesh and Tripura, right? ये सारा information इसके अंदर था, इसी content के अंदर था. Let's simply look at the content. ये जो है ना Harman Doctrine, Campion Rules, Helsinki Rules, Berlin Rules, पढ़ लेना. किस साल का है, बाकी इसमें कुछ स्पेशल नहीं है, क्योंकि हम अपनी इंटरनेशनल ट्रीटीज में ये अप्लाई नहीं करते. इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी इज अ ट्रीटी बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान, सो दैट्स अ सेपरेटली नेगोशिएटेड इंस्ट्रूमेंट, राइट? दीज आर ऑल प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ इंटरनेशनल लॉ दैट इफ you want to, these are the principles you can use in deciding about the water bodies, rights over the water bodies, right? Don't give them too much importance, but just read them, right? Helsinki rules subsumed under the Berlin rules. This is the latest set of rules. ठीक है, अब आगे चलते हैं. चलिए, ये भी आप देख लीजिएगा, पढ़ लीजिएगा केवल ट्रीटीज के बारे में. शिमला एग्रीमेंट एक छूट गया था. शिमला एग्रीमेंट के बारे में मैंने बात तो कर ली है, ठीक है. 50 साल पूरे हैं तो याद क्या करना है? इट वॉज साइंड इन 1972 आफ्टर अ कॉन्फ्रेंस इन शिमला, राइट? सो इसके बाद क्या है, ये टेक्स्ट दिया हुआ है. It provides a comprehensive blueprint for good neighborly relations, right? So the aim was how to stabilize India-Pakistan relations. So that's why we talked. War के बाद क्यों बात करते हैं? जब आप जीतते हैं और magnanimity दिखाते हैं तो it is expected that the peace would be durable. If a peace is forced on the basis of military victory, it is not durable, as seen in the aftermath of First World War. All right? Peace was imposed by the victors. What happened? Second World War happened. All right? So that's the logic with these kinds of agreements or talks. When we discuss it in a democracy, we can say कि ये victory थी, loss था, what was won on the battlefield was lost on the diplomatic table. This is the beauty of democracy. But just understand, there is one term that we use. Government in its wisdom has decided. So when you are writing the UPSC examination, you understand how governments formally think. What's the logic, right? Rather than going into intentions. कि इस आदमी का intention अच्छा है, इस आदमी का intention खराब है. इससे कोई लेना देना ही नहीं है. All right? So you see, a key principle of Simla Agreement, respect for Charter of United Nations should govern the relation. What is India saying after Ukraine? That diplomacy is the path. Respect for the principles of Charter of the United Nations and international law should govern the behavior of countries. Is it something that India is saying now also? So there is nothing special here. These are some of the foundational principles of foreign policy. Mutual commitment to peaceful resolution of all issues through dialect bilateral approaches. Bilateralism. All right? Bilateralism. ये establish किया इसने. ठीक है? इसको भी आप पढ़ लें. अगर आपको कहीं लगे कि कुछ मुश्किल है, आप मुझे बिल्कुल बताएं. राइट? बाकी चीजों के बारे में बात कर चुका हूं. चाइना पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर. राइट? क्यों न्यूज में था? China and Pakistan have decided to invite interested third country to join the CPEC project and are also planning to expand CPEC projects to Afghanistan. Well, fair enough. इसमें सोचने की या डरने की कोई बात नहीं है. CPEC तो पहले से बन रहा है. So you already know what India's position is. So here is what CPEC is. CPEC is a collection of infrastructure projects involving an investment of around 65 billion US dollars on the part of China in Pakistan. ठीक है. 2 points are being connected through these projects. One is Kashgar or Kashi in Xinjiang province of China, and another is Gwadar, the port on the Balochistan Makaran coast of the of Pakistan. ठीक है. तो इसमें बहुत सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स और ये सारी चीजें इन्वॉल्व हैं, राइट. चाइना इन्वेस्ट करेगा पाकिस्तान की इकोनॉमी के लिए, बहुत अच्छा है. व्हाट इज इंडियाज प्रॉब्लम और पोजीशन? CPEC is part of BRI, Belt and Road Initiative of China. So India's opposition to BRI primarily derives from its understanding of CPEC. CPEC passes through Gilgit-Baltistan, which for India is a formal part of its territory, is under illegal occupation of Pakistan. So since India has not been consulted on this, it's a unilateral step taken by China. For India, it's violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's why India opposes the CPEC. That's what our concern is. India क्या कर सकता है, क्या नहीं कर सकता, ये एक बहुत ही far-fetched सवाल है ना. इंडिया जो कर सकता है वो कर रहा है, which is what registering its protest and saying that we don't accept it, right? So formally पहले इतना समझ लो, उसके बाद बाकी चीजें समझना. ठीक है. So BRI was launched in 2013. Formally BRI was launched in 2017. It was conceptualized in 2013 in 2 speeches of the current president of China, Xi Jinping, right? 2017 Belt and Road Forum is a large conference through which BRI is formally launched. BRI aims to create 2 kinds of infrastructure investment and connectivity projects. One on the land, connecting China with European markets through Eurasia, through Central Asia, roads, rail lines, all right, these kinds of investments. Another is maritime, right? So this land-based route is called the Silk Route Economic Belt of BRI. And maritime, meaning connecting China's ports via South China Sea, through Southeast Asian countries, via Indian Ocean, through Asian countries to Africa and European markets. So that is called the Maritime Silk Road. तो मजाक में हम कहते हैं कि China is building a road on the land and a belt on road on the sea and belt on the land. All right, तो ये प्रोजेक्ट है. ठीक है. उसका पार्ट है CPEC. अब इसके इस कंटेंट की यूटिलिटी के लिए मैं एग्जांपल दे देता हूं. चाबहार में किसी को याद है यूपीएससी ने कैसा क्वेश्चन पूछा है? In 2017, UPSC in preliminary examination asked a question on Chabahar. What was that question? Was it terribly technical? No. The question was very simple. What is the utility of building Chabahar port for India? And the correct option was, it would help India in bypassing Pakistan and connecting with Afghanistan. Afghanistan primary था उस समय. Central Asia beyond हम कहते हैं कि तो potential is to Central Asia also, right? But we operationalized it in 2018 as a connectivity route to Afghanistan. ठीक है. तो that is the kind of question UPSC has asked. So again I would say, look at the questions and realize that once you read it, you already have the information which is required. Gilgit-Baltistan region in Pakistan. This is the map, territorial map of Jammu and Kashmir. Some part of it is within India's administration, but entirety of territory is for India officially an integral part of India. What is India's position? Jammu and Kashmir is and will be an integral part of the Indian Union, right? That's, and after that period, full stop, right? So then practically what it means is some part is controlled by India. Currently these are 2 administrative units, Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, Union Territory of Ladakh and Kargil. All right. Some parts are controlled by China. This is the Aksai Chin region. Remember the question, right? East of Aksai Chin, etc. Aksai Chin. This is Saksgam Valley or Saksgam Tract, which was ceded by Pakistan to China in 1963 after the India-China war. All right, Saksgam Valley. Right. Here is the Siachen ग्लेशियर, राइट, देयर बाय AGPL. यहां पे बीच में है काराकोरम पास, ऑलराइट, काराकोरम पास, ठीक है. नाउ दीज आर द एरियाज. पाकिस्तान ट्रेडिशनली कॉल्ड देम नॉर्दर्न एरियाज, राइट. Their traditional name is Gilgit-Baltistan. So this is Gilgit-Baltistan, right? Now this region is what Pakistan calls Azad Kashmir. We call Pakistan occupied Kashmir, right? So this is the territorial composition, and you have seen the kinds of question UPSC asks. Now the detail. The territorial division of Jammu and Kashmir as a result of war and partition, right? Then what has happened? Pakistan now is in the process of converting Gilgit-Baltistan into its 5th province. So far, Gilgit-Baltistan has an indeterminate status within Pakistan. It was directly controlled by the federal government, but it did not have any representation in the federal parliament. All right, it did not have its own representative bodies. Now, Pakistan is in the process of establishing these bodies and conducting elections, and thereby is in the process of converting it into its 5th province. Now, when that happens, what would happen? That would mean that now Pakistan is moving from the earlier position of contesting the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir to now practically merging those parts of Jammu and Kashmir which have been under its control. And whom would it benefit? It would benefit China, all right, because CPEC is passing through Gilgit-Baltistan. Now consolidation of it as a province of Pakistan is going to legitimize in some ways Pakistan's occupation of this region, and B, thereby give China an opportunity to expedite its projects. All right? और हमारा डर ये भी है कि जब एक बार इन्वेस्टमेंट आता है तो उसके पीछे मिलिट्री भी आती है, राइट? जैसा कि हम कहते हैं इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन में, फ्लैग फॉलोज द ट्रेड. ऑल राइट, सो ये इकोनॉमिक प्रोजेक्ट हो सकता है, लेकिन इसके स्ट्रेटेजिक इंप्लीकेशंस हैं. आप पढ़ें इसको, और कोई दिक्कत हो तो आप जरूर इसको अगली क्लास में उठाएं, राइट? लेट्स स्टॉप. इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेश्चंस वी विल विद दैट. और बीच बीच में जो कमेंट्री होता रहता है, ये बस इतना दिखाता है कि अभी आप एडल्ट नहीं हुए हैं, है ना. यूपीएससी देना चाहते हैं, लेकिन आपके मन में अभी भी वो कॉलेज के बैक बेंचर वाली जो इच्छाएं हैं वो बची हुई हैं, ठीक है. तो 3 घंटे मेंस का पेपर लिखना है, वहां पे भी आऊ करते रहना. 3 घंटे प्रीलिम्स देना है, वहां पे भी आऊ करते रहना, या फिर क्लास में बैठ के वो एप्टीट्यूड डेवलप कर लो बैठने का, सिटिंग. इफ देयर आर एनी क्वेश्चंस प्लीज send the questions. In the next class we start from where we have stopped. Mainly the main topic would be Bangladesh, right? Read the document, identify the difficulties that you may be facing, and try to follow, if it has made sense, the formulation that I have suggested, how to go about it. ठीक है? Are there any questions? No questions. By you don't need to remember all of them. You at least remember if there are 6 countries, at least remember 3. Elimination would work. All right. And the second thing is, if you are forgetting it, go back to it again and again, but not with the aim of remembering it. अपने दिमाग को ये टास्क मत दो कि याद रखना है. अपने दिमाग को बस ये बोलो कि I have to look at it once more. All right. That's my solution.